Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this meeting of the City of York Council Planning Committee on Thursday, the 19th of November, 2020. Welcome to members of the committee. I'll welcome them and say a little more in a moment, but also welcome to various officers of the council who are contributing to this meeting, some of whom are on screen. Many others are not on screen at the moment, but may well be joining us at various points. Can I say to them that when you do, would you please be sure to introduce yourself and your job title when you first join us on screen. We'll also be joined at various points by public speakers, and we'll come to that in due time. So welcome to the members of the committee. There are some apologies. I have apologies from Councillor de Gorn, and Councillor Baker is, Councillor Bach. Councillor Baker is substituting for him. Also apologies from Councillor Eyre, and Councillor Widdowson is substituting for him. Councillor Pavlovic, who's the vice chair of this committee, unfortunately has had to give apologies today, and there is no substitute for Councillor Pavlovic. As the vice chair, it does mean that at the start of our meeting, we'll need to elect a vice chair. Hopefully, Councillor Pavlovic will join us later. He is hoping that will be the case. If you're not familiar with the format of these meetings, and not everybody watching, welcome to those who are watching live or watching this on catch-up at a later date. The format of the meeting is fairly straightforward, as if we were in a meeting sharing a room, although in order to indicate that a member has a question or wants to say something, they will raise their virtual hand, so I will see that. And in the course of our debate and conversation, if there is a related question, if somebody has something that's relevant to the topic in hand, they will indicate by raising their physical hand, and we'll see that on screen, and give them the opportunity to come in at that point where it might be more appropriate than if they were waiting. If it's on a different matter, we'll wait until the topic moves on. We will come to a vote eventually on each of these items, and we will be doing that with a named vote. This is just to be sure that there's no confusion at all, and we'll hand over at that point in time to an officer of the council to conduct the named vote. We do have, as a first item on the agenda, we don't have any minutes to approve this meeting, because our meeting just last week hasn't yet been published, but so I do ask for declarations of interest. If there's anything on this evening's agenda for which members have to declare an interest, either personal, prejudicial, or disclosable for any reason, please do so now. I don't see anybody indicating, so Councillor Fisher.
On item 3, I'm a member of Strensall with Tothorpe Parish Council, and I'm also on the Foss Internal Drainage Board, but I was not consulted over the comments they've made. And on item 3, I'm a member of York Environmental Forum, and again, I was not involved in the comments made. Thank you for that.
As I've already indicated, we do need to appoint a vice chair for the purpose of this meeting. Can I have a nomination for that? Councillor Fenton.
Can I nominate Councillor Kilbane, please?
Do we have a seconder for that?
I second that.
I saw a number of hands there, but I thank you very much. So that has been seconded by Councillor Douglas, and as I've already said, we do need to just be clear through a named vote. So could I ask the Democratic officer please to just do that for us?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So if you could just indicate whether you're in agreement by saying for or against when I call out your name, that would be great. So Councillor Baker?
For.
Councillor Barker?
For.
Councillor Daubney?
For.
Councillor Doughty?
For.
Councillor Douglas?
For.
Councillor Fisher?
For.
Councillor Fenton?
For.
Councillor Fitzpatrick?
For.
Councillor Hollier?
For.
Councillor Kilbane?
Oh, for.
Councillor Lomas?
For.
Councillor Waters?
4.
Councillor Widdowson,
4.
and the chair.
So thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Councillor Kilbane. Thank you for conducting that for us. We have no speakers under the remit of public participation on general matters. So we come on to the plans list and item 3A. Item 3A is the Foss Upstream storage area. And I would invite the Office of the Council, I think Becky Eads is going to introduce this for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Becky Eads, Head of Development Services. In terms of the member update, there is only a very brief one today. It's amended condition 2. That's the plan condition. We've just made a tweak to some of the plans that are on there. That's on the additional information for members. Now I'm just going to share my screen for the presentation for you. Okay, that worked?
That's fine, thank you.
Perfect. So the application that you are considering in front of you is, just 2 seconds, let me just change the screen. There we go. Is formation of flood storage area consisting of construction of earth embankment with spillway, evacuation of 2 temporary and 2 permanent borrow pits, erection of river flow control structure, reprofiling sections of the River Foss, realignment of short section of Black Dyke, raising of sections of Ings Lane, carriage edge protection to part of Lillinlow Lane, and associated new and improved access arrangements, drainage accommodation works, landscaping and biodiversity mitigation. And it's a cross-boundary application with Rydale. I will go to the second. So this is a site location plan here. I'm just going to change my pointer so that you can see it. So this dotted yellow line here that you can see the laser pen following is the City of York Council boundary. So anything below that is in the City of York Council. Anything above that is Rydale District Council. So as you can see, the works in this half here are within York Council boundary. So the red line here, you can see the works that are entailed here with, again, this barrier here. I'm going to go into this in detail further on. It's easier to show you in the more detailed plans. 2 seconds. So again, this element here outlines this section here, which the later arrangements will show you in terms of changes to the stream and the embankment details along here. Again, I'm going to go into that in further detail in a further plan. So this is Black Dyke realignment plan section. You can see here. So that's the realignment in black there. That's the existing channel. I'm going to go back up to the one that is, you can just see that there, that small element there on this in terms of the larger plan. Okay, that's a typical cross section of the works there. And this is the flow control structure. These are sections of what the flow control structure will look like. Again, this will become more obvious in a second. So the structural details of how this flow structure will work. And this is a much enlarged 3D visual. So again, you can see how there's the upstand, there's the retaining wall, and the details within the structure there. This is a landscaping master plan to show exactly where the landscaping will go, how the works will flow around here. And then I'm just going, again, this is the more detailed section of the works to be completed down here in terms of the previous plan that I showed you. This is other flood storage areas examples, and this one here is one at Kirkland Bridge. It's not exactly the same, but it's along the same lines of what's proposed here. You can see how there's the embankment here, how there's the wetlands there, the excavated even wetlands within the scheme, and the flood control measures there. Again, Pickering flood storage is illustrated in this one, and the Catterick flood storage area again shows one of the structures here. I just go back up to the main plan. As you can see, there's a burrow pit within here, and again one within here, like you can see in again these plans on here. Okay, I'm going to stop screen sharing now. If there's any questions, myself and Tim, the case officer, can answer those for you now.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and that was very helpful. I'm asking if there are any questions from members at this point. Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Becky. I'm just wondering what consideration has been given to slowing the flow upstream instead of trying to catch it all a bit further downstream. Is that not possible with this?
I'm going to bring Tim in at this point to answer this, because he's obviously worked through this over many months. Tim, can you come in?
I'm Tim Good. I'm the case officer for the application. So the Environment Agency was put forward a number of schemes in York. This is the one they've come up for this area. It protects up to the 490 properties downstream, Strensall, through obviously the Foss corridor down to Huntington. They've gone through a number of options and put that in their in the information they put forward. This is the scheme they've come up with that's most effective. In terms of running out like the flow option, which I know is essentially the Pickering scheme in North Yorkshire. As I said, I'm not sure in terms of whether that was a practical one there, because obviously that's set up in the moors upstream of Pickering. But at the EA, the applicants are on hand to ask questions as well. So in terms of why solar flows not appropriate, they may be able to assist further on that. But obviously it's obviously what's specific for each location.
Thank you. Yes, we do have a speaker later, and we'll be joined by colleagues on behalf of the Environment Agency, so that may come up later. Councillor Kilbane. Councillor Doughty.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may, please. Now, the Foss Internal Drainage Board raised a number of concerns and asked for these to be picked up in the planning conditions. Are officers content that all of their concerns are picked up in the conditions that have been applied? And if there are any that haven't, is there any specific reason for that? That's the first question, if I may.
Tim, can you come back in?
So, thanks, Councillor. So what's happened is we've had this is a cross-boundary application with Rydell. So we've got not only have we got the Foss Internal Drainage Board, who we were consulted on it a couple of times. There's been several sort of tranches of information that have come forward, and they want to approximately Easter time, sort of May, say there's no objection subject to conditions. Their latest one said no objection subject to conditions in line with the comments of our flood risk engineer and the North Yorkshire County Council flood risk engineer. And the two main conditions we've got is one is a surface water drainage strategies. That's condition 3 in terms of the wording there, and then there's condition 6, which is based on the maintenance of the drainage in there. So those are the two. So the wording of the condition has been written in line with as suggested along the lines of the North Yorkshire's flood risk engineer, and in line with the relevant parts of the National Planning Policy Framework, which is paragraph 163 of the NPPF. So the Foss IDB, I believe, are going to be consulted when an approval is, if permission were granted, when the approval of details comes in, we'd have the Internal Drainage Board would be consultees on those details as well.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question, if I may, Chair,
Yes.
the environmental statement suggests that there'll be no significant effects on Strensall Common, SAC, SSI. Does the ecology officer agree with that statement?
Well, the ecology officer, when the application first came in, was City of York. So we're now using North Yorkshire's ecology services as well. So there's no objection from them, subject to relevant planning conditions in terms of the impact. So the environmental statement show there won't be an impact on the SSI and the SAC, the Special Area of Conservation at Strensall Common. So we put the appropriate planning conditions on that. And we've also been consulting, obviously, the Environment Agency in their own role as a statutory body, and Natural England as a statutory body have also, they both have no objection to the scheme. Also consulted Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, and they've put in the scheme. So we've got conditions to cover the ecological mitigation as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't see any other questions, but we do have some public speakers. So can we invite Samuel Arthur Wadsworth to join us, who wants to speak in objection? Are you there, Mr. Wadsworth? Hello, good evening.
Successfully unmuted.
Good. You've got 3 minutes to address the committee, and I'll give you an indication if we're getting close to that time. But do go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Samuel Wadsworth, and I farm with my aged and vulnerable parents and my young family at Bridge Farm, Strensall. As landowners, we're going to be severely affected by the proposed scheme. The dam structure is going to be placed on our land, and a significant area of that productive land growing root crops and turf will be subject to flooding. In principle, we support the idea of a flood alleviation scheme for York, but the applicant has failed to engage with us constructively with regarding the proposed scheme. There has been a complete lack of detail provided to us, and we have serious concerns over a number of issues, a few of which I would like to highlight. My first of 6 points is that the red line boundary is incorrect, as it does not include all the land affected in the 1 in 100-year flood position, as detailed in figure 5 of the environmental statement addendum submitted. Although this is referred to in the officer's report, the response we have received from the applicant on the 13th of November is that they are reviewing and updating the outlines in relation to this item. Therefore, the application should not be determined until the correct red line boundary is decided. Secondly, we have concerns over the flood modelling data the applicant has used. They have used data from 2007, which is not a suitable base year. I have offered to share with the applicant video and photographic evidence that the hydrology of the land does not behave as shown in the model, but they will not consider it, and instead have presented a minimal impact picture to the planning authority. We request that an independent assessment of the flood model is carried out before the application is determined, so that the planning process is based on sound and impartial information, and so we can truly understand the impact of this scheme on the land. Thirdly, the impact of the scheme on the drainage across our whole farm has not been taken into account, and no independent drainage survey has been carried out. This is going to have a significant impact on the viability of our farming business in the future, and hence is essential to safeguard jobs. Fourthly, the plans and reports submitted refer to various biodiversity mitigation measures to be placed on our land. There is no agreement in place with us regarding the installation of any of these areas on our land or the future management of them, and hence the proposed mitigation measures are completely undeliverable. My fifth point is that the applicant states in the planning application that they are proposing to use the clay from the borrow pits located on our land, yet there is no agreement in place with us regarding this. The latest correspondence from the applicant stated that they now no longer require temporary borrow pit 1 and are still unsure how much material they require from the permanent borrow pit. We believe this should be clarified before the application is determined, as this will have a significant impact on lorry movements, on the road network and across our farm, if material is to be imported. My final point is that the proposed access to the site, 5.5 kilometres right through the middle of our private farm, causes an unacceptable biosecurity risk to our livestock business. The applicant has failed to address our concerns in relation to this and dismissed our proposed alternative route. I therefore respectfully request that you defer your decision until the applicant has dealt with the concerns raised. Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for making those points. I'm going to give members of the committee the opportunity to ask any questions that might arise from that. So please bear with us for a moment.
No problem.
Okay, it doesn't seem as if there are any questions. So again, thank you for joining us, and your comments will be taken into account. Whilst you'll be dropping out of our meeting, please, I'm sure you'll be interested to follow it through the live stream. But thank you. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Bye.
And our second speaker is Richard Lever, speaking on behalf of the Environment Agency, and is joined by a number of colleagues who will be available to answer any technical questions, namely Quentin Williams, Matt Chapman, Matt Clark, and Dan Stansfield. Richard, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
Good, exactly. So 3 minutes, and I'll be extremely surprised if there aren't some questions afterwards. So you won't be rushing anywhere.
Chair, members of the Planning Committee, the proposed Foss flood storage area is one of the key projects being delivered by the Environment Agency for the City of York. During a flood event, as you all know, Foss river levels can rise rapidly, exposing properties, roads and land to the risk of severe flooding. Climate change predictions indicate the incidence of extreme weather events will increase, and therefore the risk of flooding will increase. Currently, there are no flood defences along the Foss corridor. Options to build flood walls, embankments and floodgates are not economically or technically viable given the urban landscape in the city and the length of the river frontage that would have to be protected. Of all the York Foss projects, this project will deliver the largest benefit in terms of properties protected. It will better protect 490 properties from the risk of flooding along the Foss corridor. In monetary terms, the project benefits equate to £65 million. It will also increase the resilience of the City of York by reducing flooding risk to key infrastructure and transport routes. In addition, the scheme will deliver, as part of its mitigation plans, habitat creation benefits in terms of tree planting, wetland creation and riverbank habitat. The proposed scheme is to construct a flood storage area in the rural landscape 1.5 kilometres northeast of Strensall. For the vast majority of days in any 1 year, water will pass through the structure without the storage area being utilised. It's only during flood events that the storage area will fill with water, holding the water back and in doing so reducing the risk of flooding to properties from Strensall all the way to York city centre. Once the flood event has passed, the water in the storage area will subside. Even in a 1 in 100 year flood probability event, the water will only be held in the storage area for 2 days. This infrequent use of the flood storage area will mean the landscape will remain largely unchanged and farming practice will continue in the flood storage area footprint. In support of the scheme, we've undertaken extensive engagement. Whilst there have been a number of objections to the scheme proposals, the overall majority of people we have engaged with have supported the proposals. We've engaged over the last 2 years with landowners in the vicinity of the scheme. While some individual landowners have disagreed with the scale of the flood impacts, we are confident that a fair and accurate model assessment has been undertaken. Whilst compensation matters are not a material planning consideration, we will continue to work with landowners to try and reach agreement. We are grateful that the City of York Planning Officer has worked diligently to assess the application against all relevant development plan policy and MPPF considerations. In summary, this application supports a scheme which will deliver the benefits of better protecting 490 vulnerable properties from the risk of flooding in the City of York. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking for questions, and at the moment, I think the first is from Councillor Fisher. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Lever. The first question I've got to ask is about the realignment of Black Dyke. Obviously, that is necessary to get it further away from the actual embankment of the flood storage area. Will it cause any interruption to path 16, which is a much used path for people walking in that area? And in particular, will it involve any works on the footbridge? Because remember, the footbridge has only been there a couple of years because it was washed away in the floods of 2015 by the waters coming down Black Dyke. So obviously we're reluctant to see that lost. What are your views on it?
So in terms of the footpath, so there would be no permanent or temporary closure of the footpath. There will be a divert section which is outside the City of York boundary on the Rydale side up towards Ings Lane. In terms of the footbridge, yes, as you say, it was replaced following 2015. With the flood storage in place, it will reduce certainly the flood risk of that footbridge being damaged in the future.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Councillor Waters has
Yes,
a hand up.
I'm noting that. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Just to Mr. Lever, if you've been in such close liaison with the landowners, why have we just listened to Mr. Wadsworth's quite serious concerns over this? And what are you proposing to do to alleviate his concerns?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say, we recognise that this proposal is not of the Wadsworth choosing or other landowners in that area. So we recognise that, and that's right for me to say also, in all our dealings with the Wadsworth, they've been very courteous and supportive and given us access to date. But I think it is appropriate for me to say, just to give you a flavour of the level of engagement that has gone on. So we first met the Wadsworth in May 2018. We started the engagement at that stage. We've probably had around 10 meetings with them over that period. We took the family actually over to the Pickering Sloane Flow. So we took the family over there, Sam and his parents, to show them that project there, to give them an indication of what the project would look like. It's a very similar project. This project is a slowing the flow type project, so very similar to that. We've updated them all the way through the process. So we've done around 6 months of modelling the impacts of drains on the whole scheme and also on the land of Mr. Wadsworth. We brought everybody into our offices to be able to demonstrate that through some computer flows. We've presented formal reports back to the Wadsworth family on all that work. We also recognise that the Wadsworths and other landowners in the area are not technical experts on this. This is something new to them. So we've paid for independent advice for each of the landowners, and the landowners have taken that up. So they are being advised independently on our proposals, and the EA obviously paying for those fees. So we've tried all the way along over 2 years to go through those engagement tasks and demonstrate our proposals. We've listened and we've taken on board suggestions along that way in terms of drainage impacts, routes onto the site and those kind of things. So I believe that we've done a comprehensive and engage in an open and a transparent way.
I fully appreciate you've carried all that out, which sounds exemplary, but it still doesn't alter the fact that he's turned up at this meeting to raise serious concerns. The one that I picked up on was the route and the biosecurity of his farm and his business and his livelihood. Yeah.
So can I bring in one of my colleagues? So Quinton Williams, just perhaps just talk about that access route and the conversations we've had about that with them, if I may.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. In terms of biosecurity, obviously we will work with both our contractors and Mr. Wadsworth and his family to make sure that adequate provisions are made for biosecurity on his land. That's something that the main contractor for the works, Spice Works, has been involved in, and will be part of our site management plan as well. So we'll work with the Wadsworths on that. So there is a provision in our process for that.
Okay.
Right, I'll probably just check with the officer that is
Sure.
conditioned.
Sure.
Just going back to conditions, the concerns of the Foss Drainage Board were mentioned earlier, and I note the condition that I think the planning officer was referring to, which is condition 5, and that speaks of a condition that's got to be, before work can start, that's got to be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority. Would the Environment Agency be content with some extra word in there that this, the details of the means of operation, management, repair and maintenance of the flood storage area, assorted apparatus, embankments and borrow pits have been submitted? I would have liked some reference with the to the satisfaction of the Foss Drainage Board and then approved by the local planning authority. Because at the moment, it seems that whatever's submitted could be approved by the council and there would still be some form of concern left for the Foss Drainage Board to deal with.
Okay, thanks for that question. I see that Becky Eads is attracting my attention, and it may be helpful just to respond briefly to that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's for the applicant to answer. That's
No.
one for us as a local planning authority to consider, and we do involve the drainage board as part of this process, but ultimately the decision rests with the local planning authority on that condition. So I don't think that's something that the applicant can necessarily answer.
Okay.
Because
We're
it's
just
whether or
asking
not
them if they would be content with something
yeah, but
like
I don't
that.
think as a local planning authority we'd be content with actually accepting a condition like that or proposing it.
Okay, Councillor Waters, that has been heard. It will have been heard by the applicant, and it may be something we return to in a moment. Councillor Fenton had been indicating that he had a question, but I see that he's put the hand down, so maybe not now. Councillor Kilbane, please.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Mr. Lever, you heard the contention from the landowner that there's no agreement on mitigation measures in terms of biodiversity with the Environment Agency, and no agreement on the use of the, I can't remember what you call them now, but the clay pits, essentially. First of all, do you accept that that is the case? And if it is the case, would you accept a condition that work won't start until a level of agreement has been reached?
So whilst we like to obviously work with landowners and get those discussion and agreements with landowners, I need to explain, I think, the basis of how these works will take forward from an EA and a legislation perspective. So obviously the Environment Agency, one of our primary purposes is deliver flood risk projects, and obviously of a public good and of probably the highest sort of ranking in terms of public safety. In recognition of that, we operate within the Water Resources Act, so primary legislation, and that gives us powers to construct, operate, maintain flood defences on people's lands. So we don't need the permission, we need consent and we need planning permission, but we don't need the agreement of landowners when we are using these powers. But under those same that same act, there's recognition, obviously, that people aren't agreeing to that. So that same act gives provision for compensation. So both in terms of the habitat, which are mitigation required within planning, and also the borrow pits, we have the powers to be able to build that and use and deliver those habitat requirements.
Thank you. Do you want to follow that up, Councillor Kilbane?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We understand how it works, Mr. Lever. We've been down this path on many occasions within the City of York Planning Department. The question was whether or not you were prepared to reach agreement with the landowner, and I'm hearing that that's a no.
No, I'm not saying that. We have made offers, obviously, to the landowners. They're obviously subject to commercial confidentiality, but they are offers and they are being discussed, and landowners are being advised by those independent land agents.
Okay, I think we'll probably take that as far as we can. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. So you mentioned compensation there, and I noticed in the report that the NFU said that compensation hadn't been discussed. Can you tell us what the current situation is with that, please?
Hang on, sorry,
Sure
hang on.
Again.
Hang on,
Okay,
before we go
please,
down. Sorry.
Please come in there, please come in.
That's not part of the planning process, and I don't think that it's appropriate to start getting into discussions as part of the planning application in terms of compensation. It's completely separate. It's not something that I think you should be doing. I'm going to look if Heidi's in the background to make sure that she's happy with what I'm saying, but I don't think we should be getting into that at this point here. Heidi?
Hello, Heidi.
Yeah, hello. So Heidi Lehane, Senior Solicitor for the Council. Yeah, the compensation process is completely separate. It's not a material planning consideration, and therefore you do need to disregard that in your consideration. So therefore it's probably not appropriate to get into discussions about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Sorry for butting in. Thank you.
No, appreciated and fully understood. I'm Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. This one is relevant. There's a slight, shall we say, contradiction in the report. In section 543, it says the EA indicate there is likely to be required an import of clay of approximately 2,100 cubic metres to make up for a shortfall of clay of the necessary quality from the borough pits. But in 557, it says the applicants undertaking further work confirms they will no longer require to import clay. Could the applicant inform us which of those two is correct, please?
So we do not need the requirement to import that clay onto the site as part of this planning application.
So that means it will drastically reduce the number of lorry journeys required onto the site?
It will indeed, yeah. So there's, because we can use the clay and the borough pit sources on site, we do not need to import clay. So both in terms of the transport impacts and big environment in terms of climate change benefits of not having to use lots of lorry imports.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. At this point, no other members are indicating they have any further questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Lever, and thank you to Mr. Williams, Chapman, Clark, and Stansfield too, who've been standing by to answer questions. Having heard all of that, I'm going to give members the opportunity to put any further questions to our officers. Councillor Waters.
Just going back to this condition 5 then, I don't think anybody would want to hold this scheme up unduly. Is there any way that we could decide on this scheme with a rider that condition 5 came back to the committee if other members weren't happy with it? I certainly think it needs toughening up, that the Foss Drainage Board need to be content and comfortable with the future maintenance arrangements. Otherwise, we could be potentially approving something that 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line turns into a wrangle about maintenance.
Thank you. So is it possible to have a response to that from one of the officers?
Yeah, I'm just double checking the exact wording. It already says no development shall take place until details of means of operation, of management, repair and maintenance of the flood storage area associated. Then it goes on, have been submitted to and approved in writing with the local planning authority. And then it goes on to what details we would include. But we do consult them as part of the discharge of condition process. So they are involved in that process. They might not be specifically named, but they are consulted as part of the discharge of condition. So we would, as standard, involve them.
Okay,
I understand that. I understand that. But if you consulted with them and they weren't happy, but the local planning authority was, that's where the problem could arise. I've seen it happen with other planning applications, and what has been approved by the authority, local planning authority, is not what the Foss Drainage Board have sought. That's why I think it's critical that this condition should be worded better.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And unless you want to add anything further, I think that may be something that we choose to explore as we debate this. I'm not seeing any other questions from members, so thank you very much. So how do we want to take this? I have a sense that there's general support. We've we've heard the objections of Mr. Wadsworth, but we've also heard that in terms of planning considerations, issues around compensation and so forth, are not for us to consider in this context. Who wants to kick us off with this and make some proposition? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. The benefits of this scheme are self-evident for anyone who experienced the floods in 2015. I spent a very happy Boxing Day afternoon up to my knees in water trying to stop properties flood, and I really don't want to do that again. It doesn't have a massive impact on my ward, but the impact further down when you get into the Huntington Road catchment area in York is colossal. So it's a critically important scheme that we do try to get through, provided the conditions are actually suitable. One of the key ones is that there's no impact on Strensall Common SSSI SAC, because that is probably, arguably, one of the most important areas of wildlife conservation in the north of England, and it is it's a rare habitat, and I'm satisfied that there will be no damage to it. As far as the actual dam structure is concerned, there will be the loss of some open aspect, particularly when you're walking along path 16, which crosses the River Foss just downstream. But at the same time, that is fairly minimal because the dam structure is only about 4 meters high with a small railing on the top of it. So I don't think the loss of views are critical, even though this could be argued to be within either the green belt or open countryside. I think the key thing, which is not material to our section of the planning application, but I think as morally we should take into account, is the effect on land drains upstream. But I think the assertion in there that the drains will only flood, this flood area will only flood for about 36 hours and hence only block the land drains further up, should not impact severely on anybody's viability of their crops upstream. So with all that taken into account, I believe it's safe for me to move approval of this application.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Fisher. I've also had indication from Councillors Willowson and Doughty. First of all, were either of you about to second that? Councillor Willowson.
I absolutely agree with what Councillor Fisher is saying, and it's part of a very important building reservoirs, slowing down the river all the way back up to the top of where the 4 rivers meet that come into the Ouse, along with, to answer one of the questions earlier from one of our participants, the 200 hectares that we are jointly planting at the source of all of these rivers. Over time, this will give lots of people much more security and safety, given climate change is continuing. I absolutely second what Councillor Fisher is saying. Okay.
And Councillor Doughty, well, please come in there. You're going to third it, okay. I'll third it. So go ahead if you want to say more.
I'm quite happy with both our Councillor Fisher and Councillor Widdowson have said, and we've seen the success, albeit only a short number of years, of what's happened at Pickering. I'm hoping we'll have the same effect in reducing flood risk in York in years to come. So definitely support this application.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's certainly been proposed and seconded. Before we put this to the vote, I noticed that Councillor, do go ahead. Do go ahead, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to propose that we add a sentence into condition 5. If you go to the top of page 43, at the end of the local planning authority, I would like it to say, to meet the satisfaction of the Foss Internal Drainage Board maintenance requirements. A simple sentence.
Okay. Can I, to deal with this efficiently, Councillor Fisher, do comment on that first. Go on.
I would be happy for that to be put into the condition 5. No problem with it at all.
Okay, and Councillor Widdowson, who seconded that? Okay, you're happy with that. Okay, then I think we're in a position to put this to the vote. Becky, if you could just sum up for us and put some flesh on that, we'll then invite Chris, the democracy officer, to take a name vote.
Okay. Just going back to your proposal for that condition, I'd like to just get Heidi's advice on whether or not we can do that, because I'm not sure that what you're proposing is actually reasonable in terms of where we're going with it. Okay. So can I just bring Heidi in just to make sure, please?
Please do.
Hello. Yeah, I was just considering that myself. See, we're not really in control of that. I think it is reasonable, Becky. And if it can't be achieved, then we'd have to look at coming back to committee or a variation of that condition. I think it is reasonable in the circumstances.
Fine. Just wanted to check.
Okay.
That was
Yeah, I was just running through. Sorry, I was running through in my head whether I think it would be, and I think in the circumstances it would be. We don't ordinarily do it, but I think in this case it's something that we could seek to achieve.
And Heidi, is there a wording that you would recommend for this?
I would have preferred in conjunction or to seek, but we do that anyway. So it's quite clear you want the satisfaction. I guess I'd like, reasonable satisfaction. The lawyers always like that kind of reasonableness in there, but equally, if members feel it needs to be to the satisfaction, such an important issue, then I accept that would be a reasonable condition in the circumstances. Hope that helps.
And I'm going to propose from the chair, and hope it meets agreement, that we use that as the wording, the reasonable satisfaction. Councillor Waters, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with that.
Okay.
And the Foss Drainage Board are a reasonable organisation, as are the Environment Agency. And once they get together, it is a critical issue. And if they sort it between themselves, all well and good.
Okay. So again, Becky, if you could just
thank you.
Sum up the proposition.
Yep. So recommended for approval with the change to the condition as outlined in the additional information, and change to condition 5 to include the wording that we've just discussed in terms of the Foss Internal Drainage Board, but specifically including reasonable as part of that.
Thank you very much. So before I ask the democracy officer to conduct the name vote, I'm going to check that all members have actually heard all of the debate around this particular application. Nobody's dropped out and missed anything. Please just wave a hand. I think that's everybody. Councillor Widdowson, thank you. Thank you. So if you would conduct the vote for us, please.
Thanks, Chair. So members, we've had a motion to approve, proposed by Councillor Fisher and seconded by Councillor Widdowson. So to please just state if you are for, against or abstaining from the motion. Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Barker.
For.
Councillor Daubney.
For.
Councillor Doughty.
For.
Councillor Douglas.
For.
Councillor Fenton.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
For.
Councillor Hollier.
For.
Councillor Kilbane.
For.
Councillor Lomas.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Widdowson.
For. And
the chair.
For.
It's unanimous, Chair.
I think it is. So thank you very much. So that is approved. We will take a break because we need to bring in public speakers for the next item on the agenda. It's almost 5:30. So can we adjourn and reconvene, I suggest, at 17:45? Thank you very much. If members would just switch off their videos, please. Welcome back to this meeting of the City of York Council Planning Committee. We're meeting on Thursday, the 19th of November 2020. We've come to the second application we're considering this evening, which is item 3B on our plans list, St George's Field Car Park on Tower Street. And I'm going to invite Becky Eads to introduce this application.
Thank you, Chair. By way of a brief update to the application, we've had further comments from the flood risk management team, and they have stated that there is additional information, but it is acceptable to be covered by condition, and the additional conditions are outlined in the additional information sheet for members' consideration. I'm now going to share my screen again to do a presentation of this scheme. Just bear with me while I make that a tad bigger. There we go. So the application is for the erection of a 5-level multi-storey car park with canopy to roof to provide 372 car parking spaces, demolition of public toilet, revised highway access and associated landscaping works. Slide 1 is the location plan. Just going to change my cursor again so you can see it. Again, outlined in red here. Site location plan. Slide 2 is the proposed elevation. So you can see at the top here where my pointer is, that's the south elevation, looking towards the new car park. The bottom is the north elevation of the new car park. You can see the existing landscaping around the sides of the site. Slide 3 is the west elevation. As you can see, again, the stories within there and the solar canopy to the roof. Again, the east elevation, you can just see the bus illustrated in there and the access arrangements around there. Slide 3 is the southeast and the southwest elevations. Just leave that there for a minute to look at. So this slide shows the proposed ground floor plan. As you can see, the new building within here and the access in here. Just going to go to the next one because this is probably easier to see. So you can see this is proposed level 1 plan. The disabled spaces within here, the in, the out, as well as the one that could be for either in here. And again, landscaping around here that you can see. Slide 2 again shows, sorry, the next slide shows a proposed plan level 2, 3, 4, and these are the sections through the site, so you can see how it works in terms of the access through to each of the levels here. And this is the proposed solar canopy to the roof, as you can see, running diagonally there. This is the site plan, the vehicular access into the site here, as you can see, just where my pointer is there. Okay. This is the illustrative master plan. So I think this is quite a useful plan in terms of showing how much additional landscaping will form part of the works to what's there now. As members will be aware, this area is all currently tarmacked, but as you can see, there's going to be quite a significant amount of extra landscaping and space within there, and then the building within this hatched area here. So this is a visualization 1. This is a Tower Street junction. You can see there what the new building will look like. Again, this is a visualization. This is the visualization 2 from Clifford's Tower Base. You can just see here where my pointer is, the roof canopy there, and again, the building behind. This is the view from the top of Clifford's Tower, looking down. Existing buildings within here, roundabout, and the new car park there. And slide 3 is the visualisation from Terry's Avenue. You can just see the car park where my pointer is there. And this is the Tower Street Bridge. If you can just see where my pointer is again. The application site's in there. Oh, and that's it for this one. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Before I open up for questions, having welcomed members back, I'm pleased to welcome back to, or welcome to the meeting, Councillor Pavlovic, who had hoped to be able to join us for this item, and hopefully the next one too. Councillor Pavlovic, we had earlier appointed a vice chair for the duration of the time that you were not with us. I assume that it's would meet with approval from the committee if we just reaffirm that Councillor Pavlovic is vice chair of the committee. Can I just see a show of hands for that? Thank you very much. Okay. And thank you for your willingness to serve, even if briefly, Councillor Kilbane. Are there any questions that members would like to put to officers? I've got Councillor Lomas and then Councillor Baker. Councillor Lomas first.
Oh, sorry, just had a difficulty unmuting there. It's saying the host wasn't allowing me to. So just a quick question, Becky. I found the visualizations really helpful, but can you confirm the trees and greenery that are shown, are they existing or are they kind of impressions of things that will be planted?
Helps if I unmute, doesn't it? Just a second. I will just quickly flick back through just to confirm for myself. Hang on 2 seconds. So there are some trees that will be removed, and there is some new planting. So this is the proposal as it will look. So this includes any removal and any new planting to the visualisations. That's my understanding. I'm going to ask Rachel, who's the case officer in the background, just to confirm if that's the case, just to make sure I'm right.
Hi there, yeah, Rachel Tyers, case officer for the application. Yes, that's my understanding, Becky.
Great, thanks, Rachel.
Just a quick supplementary to that, if that's okay. I mean, we've had discussions previously where trees are being removed and new ones planted, but there is a significant difference between a mature, large, wide-spreading tree and a new sapling, and it can take you know, decades in some cases for a tree to reach the kind of the visual impact of one that it is replacing. So for me, I mean, it's perhaps something that the applicant can talk through to us later. Okay. That clarification. Otherwise, the visualizations are perhaps not as helpful as they might seem.
I have got a copy of a tree removal plan if you want, if that would help, which identifies which ones are going to be removed. There'd also be a condition securing the suitable replacement. So obviously that's something that we'd take into account through the condition process to make sure, like you say, that you would want a suitable size and appropriate species of tree to be replanted. Do you want to see the tree plan? Would that be useful?
If that's possible.
Yeah, just 2 seconds. I've got it, so I just need to share my screen again with it. Right. Can you see that there?
We can, thank you.
So you can see the ones that will have to be removed due to the position of the building. There. Mm-hmm. I'm going to flick. I'm just going to stop sharing a minute and flick back to the landscaping plan because that'll show you what it will then look like. Just a minute.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Just 2 seconds. So there you go. So that's the illustrative master plan there. You can see the landscaping within there. So yes, there will be some removed, but there is extra planting within there. Rachel, do you know exactly how many new? There's definitely more trees being planted than are lost. I just don't know off the top of my head exactly what that is. Rachel, do you know the answer to that?
Yes, there was originally 14 proposed to be replanted, but then the applicants confirmed they'll plant an additional 7 to the east elevation, so along the meadow area by the Foss Basin.
Thanks,
so
Rachel.
A total of 25.
Councillor Fisher, you have a supplementary?
Thank you. I did notice in the report it mentioned a large lime tree, which I've looked on Google Maps and I'm pretty sure I've seen that, there's just the relevant tree. It's a particularly fine specimen. Is there absolutely no way that could be saved?
I would think not, because we wouldn't want to remove trees unless absolutely necessary. Obviously you've got to take into account whether or not it would damage the tree and its future health. So that in the balance, we've taken that there's an additional 25 trees for that loss of the one tree. In the balance, you're actually achieving more there. That's where we've got to with that one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the toilets, Becky, but could I just also check that I've not missed a visualisation that was from a pedestrian's point of view as they're walking along New Walk? So as you're coming from Blue Bridge down New Walk, walking along the Riverside path, has there not been a visualisation done of that for people looking across the car park?
I haven't necessarily got one. I think it's key that they are visualizations. What we need to rely on is the actual elevation details that I showed you at the beginning to look at exactly the scale drawings that will show what it looked like. The visualizations are an aid, really. So it's rely more on the elevations that we showed originally rather than the visualizations. That's what planning officers, that's what we do in terms of assessing it. But I'm not aware that there is that visualization, but we didn't think it was necessary given that we have all the elevations that I walked through at the beginning.
Yeah. Right. As a pedestrian cyclist, I would have found it really helpful to see it from their point of view along that path. Anyway, can I just ask about the toilets? So I think are they on level 1 or are they on level 0? And my concern is that are they going to be completely accessible to the general public, and can you talk through how they will be accessible to general public, that people that are not using the car park, and whether 4 is considered enough? I can't see them on the map.
Rachel, can you pick that one? Oh,
I think Rachel's struggling for the moment.
Yeah, sorry, it wouldn't unmute for some reason.
That's fine, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I can say that the toilets are on the first floor, because obviously that's the floor that will be accessible during flood times. So the disabled spaces and the toilets are on the first floor. I think it's probably a question for the applicant later as to the details. We haven't been provided with that extent of detail for the planning application.
Okay, thank you.
but I think just to come in from a planning point of view, what they've proposed, where we consider is sufficient in terms of this planning application, that what is proposed is acceptable.
Okay, Councillor Doughty.
Thank you, Chair. In paragraph 3.47, it tells us about North Yorkshire Police, and they're not able to support the application because of the open-sided ground floor, as it could, and as a quote, it could make the site very attractive for illegitimate users and antisocial behaviour. So my question was going to be around how will this be mitigated, but then I note in 5.69 it suggests this would be addressed by increasing staffing and security if any such issue would arise. So that does then beg the question, is there provision in the budgets for that to happen?
I think from a planning point of view, we're confident that this can be secured by condition. In terms of the ground floor being open, that's critical due to flood mitigation for the multi-storey car park. So that's needed, and there's a reason behind that, and we're comfortable with that. The final details will be confirmed, but it does include the car park to be staffed 24 hours with security, CCTV, and that obviously that'll be monitored and to provide regular patrols of the car park. So from our point of view, we're confident that the measures that we can secure through the conditions and that are proposed, that it would be acceptable from a security point of view.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pavlovic, is this a supplementary or a new question?
Chair. And by the way, thank you very much to Councillor Kilbane for stepping in as Vice Chair. It's a supplementary question to Councillor Doughty's, okay. Because I share the self-same concerns that both he and the police have outlined. You stated, Becky, that a condition is that it is staffed 24 hours a day. That's not actually correct, is it? It's not staffed 24 hours a day.
No, it's a condition for these measures to be secured. That's what the proposals are. But we'd work with the applicant to ensure that we got appropriate measures through this condition. That's what they've said that they're looking at providing at the moment, but it will be secured through the final detail. That's normal for an application of this type, that we would then secure these details via condition.
Well, can I just clarify, because I mean, for me, this is absolutely a crucial element of this scheme. Can 24-hour-a-day staffing be a planning condition?
It's whether or not that's reasonable, because I think the measures that they've proposed, the applicant, sorry, it's the intention, but I think that potentially monitoring CCTV 24 hours a day there would be considered as also sufficient. So it's whether or not that is reasonable to request it in planning terms, that it is staffed 24 hours a day, because obviously that has an impact. So it's that balance, isn't it? Of we think that we've achieved it through the condition that it will be 24-hour CCTV that will be monitored and patrolling where necessary, which is.
But if it impacts on sustainability and access to the site, because it's an unsafe site because of illegitimate use and antisocial behaviour, would that then make it a planning matter?
Yeah, in terms of the security of the site, but it's the weight that we give to it. It's not because of the information that we have, and because we've got a condition there, we feel that we're in a strong enough position to recommend the approval and secure the details through the conditions in this case. And it's how far you go, isn't it? And we don't think that anything further than that is necessary, given the information that we have so far from the applicant. And it's as we talk to you about all the time, it's whether or not it's reasonable to request anything more than that. And that's what, as officers, we've made the recommendation that the condition is reasonable.
I mean, it's something that I will be exploring further with the applicant and also within debate. But it's not, in my opinion, usual that even with the mitigation that's been proposed, that a statutory authority such as the police are in a position to say we do not support this application despite the mitigation. So, you know, my question I just throw back to you is that if the police don't feel that the condition that you've put in place currently is reasonable, can we as a planning authority, and maybe it's a question for you, maybe it's a question for Heidi, can this planning authority insist that as a planning condition that it is staffed 24 hours a day?
In terms of their objection, it also relates to the fact that it's open at the ground floor, but as I've said, it needs to be open because of the flooding aspect there. So you can't, you're never going to overcome that one because of the nature of the flooding. So that you just can't, you just couldn't overcome it because of the flooding in the car parking. In terms of wanting it staffed 24 hours a day, I've given that advice in terms of, I don't think that it's reasonable, it's going above and beyond given the condition that we've got, but again, that's entirely for you for debate.
Thank you. Councillor Pavlovic, I hear and understand your concerns given the comments that the police have made on this, and I'm sure that you'll return to this as we debate it later. Was there another question that you had?
There is, but it's not in relation to that. I did have my hand up.
You did, and I was going to come to you. I was going to come to you next. So I'm just checking. Please go ahead.
Right. So I have no further supplementaries on the policing issue and the security issue, but I do have a question in respect of the conservation architect. And is the conservation architect present this evening?
No.
Right, because that would have been relevant for the next application as well.
But you can ask the questions of us. Obviously, we've made the planning balance, and
so
we've made that judgment in recommended approval.
In 310. The conservation architect states it's impossible to understand the potential impact of the proposals and support the conclusion in the heritage statement as it has insufficient detail. The level of detail is not proportionate to the various assets' importance, and that is in relation to the solar panel. And Historic England make much the same comments, that the statement of heritage significance fails to demonstrate the relationship between harm and public benefit. There are inconsistencies and omissions from the assessment. It would have been really helpful if we could have explored that further with them, but given that you've had those comments, what was your assessment?
The assessment is further on in the report in terms of the planning balance, because I think they've made their point very clear, haven't they, that they don't support this application, and then it's for us as the planning officers to make assess the benefits of the proposal. And obviously that's what we've done, and that's what the report concludes, that overall the benefits to the scheme and that's been weighed up in the balance, and that's where we've got to the recommendation that we've got to. And we acknowledge their point, but in the balance, we don't think that they're sufficient for us to not be recommending this for approval. We think it's acceptable as it is. So but again, that's the weight that we've given. Go on, sorry.
No, I'm asking the chair. Can I ask just a supplementary to that?
You can, and I'm just checking. Councillor Baker, I think you also have a supplementary. I'll come to you in a moment, but please continue, Councillor.
So it seemed that their issue was in respect of the solar canopy. Is the solar canopy an absolute deal breaker as far as this application is concerned?
Don't
or
think
is that a question for the applicant?
That's not really a question
for the applicant.
For me, but I think from a planning point of view, we're comfortable with that, and it's something that we're quite happy to see there.
Okay, Councillor Baker.
Again, I don't know if you're the right person to ask. It is supplementary about the canopy again. In lots of places in the report, it refers to the designs having a solar canopy. And to me, that means the building is designed to be built with a solar canopy. But then in another place, it says that the design is suitable for PV photovoltaic panels. And there's just a little bit of a discrepancy there in my mind as to, is the building being built with a solar canopy in this current design, or is it still just potentially it could be, or it may not be? And if it did have a solar canopy, would the generation of electricity just be purely for servicing the car park, or for something wider?
To answer the first part of your question, you consider an application that does have the solar canopy. So that's what they're putting forward for approval. So yes, in terms of the energy generation, I don't know the answer to that. Rachel, do you know that? Might be one for the applicant. They will probably know the answer to that better than us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got both Councillor Widdowson and Councillor Kilbane who want to ask further questions, and I'm going to invite Councillor Widdowson first, then Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions. Going back to the 24/7 staffing of the car park, will we be able to ask the applicant how many 24/7 car parks there are in England? I don't know, and how many of them are actually staffed, so that we've got an idea of what the reason. I'm just trying to test out the reasonableness, Becky, when you were putting that in.
While they're talking, I'll have a see what I can find. How about that?
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
And then the other comment that I had to make is when you look at where you put the trees up, the visual for the trees, and then the trees that are going away, all the trees on the riverside are staying. So they are massively staying, and then the ones on the east side are being augmented. So it actually looks like it's a significant improvement on what is already on the site in terms of trees, vegetation, and biodiversity. So I just wanted to make sure that that was what we were coming away with.
Yeah, that's the judgment that officers have made as part of this process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I did pick that up, but I think we all noticed, of course, the visuals include the trees in full foliage, and that's far from the case at the moment.
But just on that, Chair, there is an awful lot of green wall around the building and cladding that will, over time, silver.
I did notice that too. Councillor Kilbane.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Becky. This is probably a question for Rachel. Are the highways works LTN 120 compliant?
We've got Helen in the background, so she can come in and answer that one.
Hi, good evening, Helen.
Good evening. My name is Helen Versher. I'm from the Highways team. I not completely no, due to issues with the land and space available. So there's a lot of shared space, and obviously there's no dedicated cycle route.
Would you like to comment on any concerns you might have about that?
You're inviting further comment, Chair. Yeah, well, there's obviously concerns about not complying with the guidance, but also concerns about whether or not we get any funding from central government if we don't comply with the guidance, because they're pretty clear they're not going to fund schemes that don't.
Okay, again, that may be something we return to. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. It's 5.9 on page 88 states that overall we're going to lose 133 car parking spaces. Has consideration been given to expanding car parks elsewhere? My concern is sort of first up, best dressed, and are we going to cause a blockage? We're trying to turn the cars around looking for other spaces.
That's being taken into account again as a whole in terms of the proposal, and this site can accommodate the number of car parking spaces that form part of it, but yes, overall there is a loss. But again, the sustainability measures that form part of the proposals of where the council are wanting to go and reducing the car parking spaces in the town centre and encouraging park and ride. So again, in the balance, I think that it's acceptable.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to turn now to the public speakers, and I think the first of those is Lynette Mills. Lynette Mills, can you hear me? Are you able to address the committee? Lynette Mills, who has registered to speak in objection.
Hello, can you hear me?
Absolutely, loud and clear.
Okay.
Please go ahead, and you have 3 minutes to speak to the committee.
Okay. Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to address this meeting. The building of a multi-storey car park on St George's Field will have a serious negative visual impact on this hereto picturesque area immediately south of the city centre. It will impact on views from the New Walk, it will impact on views of and from Clifford's Tower, and it will impact on the views of and from Skeldergate Bridge. And please, just to note as well, on the visual aspect of the plan, there's absolutely no consideration given to any planting of trees on the Foss side of the basin. From the towpath, if you look across to St George's, you're going to see this huge car park and nothing, no trees. There's a very few. Also, I have spoken before about removing that big lime tree, which I think the plans can be slightly altered to save it. It's a very old tree. St. George's Field could be a marvellous natural asset to York. Sitting as it does at the confluence of two rivers, it should be a green corridor, a green wedge connecting Clifford's Tower to the New Walk and to Roundtree's Park. I am sure that this is what was in mind when the field was gifted to the York Corporation, quote, for use for public events. With the development and proposed development of numerous hotels and blocks of flats on Piccadilly and surrounding areas, there's a risk of creating a concrete jungle, making it imperative to have access to local outdoor green areas for both physical and mental well-being. This has been emphasized by the pandemic. Turning St. George's Field into a multi-story car park will exacerbate the problem. The building of a multi-story car park in the center of the city will encourage traffic into the center, doing nothing to alleviate the congestion and sometimes illegal levels of pollution on the inner ring road and its feeder radials. This is a completely viable alternative, the better development of park and ride. The decline of some sectors of retail in the city centre is not due to lack of parking, but rather a result of changing shopping habits, most notably online shopping and shopping at the outer city shopping malls. Moving some inner city parking to park and ride is unlikely to have any adverse effect on the city centre retail. The development around Clifford's Tower should not be contingent on a multi-storey car park being developed on St. George's Field. And the building of a multi-storey car park should not be a component of the York Castle Gateway Master Plan. Councillors, you now have a unique opportunity to redefine York in a way that is in line with all the climate change proposals being put forward. Please, I ask, reject the building of this brutal edifice in the centre of our beautiful medieval city of York, the capital of the North. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your contribution, and I'm going to give opportunity to members to ask questions if they would like to do so. So please just bear with us for a moment.
Thank you.
Okay, and it doesn't seem to be the case there are any questions. So thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for voicing your concerns. That is appreciated. And if you want to watch the rest of the course of this meeting, you will be able to do that on the live stream. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, again, an objection, John Hay. Mr. Hay, can you hear me? Are you there?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Excellent, excellent.
Hi.
You have the opportunity now to speak to members of the committee, and you have up to 3 minutes to do that. If we're getting close to that, I will indicate, but please do go ahead.
Right, my name is John Hay. I'd like to thank the committee for giving me the chance to voice my objection to this scheme. I have one question, a very simple question. I would like to ask why the council, whose avowed intention is to reduce the traffic in the city centre, for all sorts of good reasons like the reduction of noise, congestion and pollution, is wanting to build a huge car park which will increase noise, congestion and pollution in the city centre, where a green park will be more likely to achieve the council's aims and be welcomed by the York residents. Thank you, that's all I need to say.
Well, thank you very much. Again, I'm going to invite members who have questions to do so, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So thank you very much for joining us. And again, if you'd like to watch the rest of this decision, you would be able to do that by following the live stream.
Okay, thank you very much, Sharon.
Our next speaker, again in objection, Johnny Hayes. Good evening.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can indeed. And I don't think I need to tell you how this works. Please go ahead and address the committee.
Thank you. When I first saw this proposal, I was shocked that the City of York Council could seriously be suggesting this 5-storey car park to be built next to some of the city's most important and strategic heritage assets on St George's Field. I felt like I'd been transported back to the 1970s, to my previous hometown of Bradford, when multi-storey car parks were regarded as a sign of progress. This was a time when cars were king and totally dominant in planning terms. The conservation of heritage buildings was seen as being of minor importance, a time when truly hideous buildings were built that everybody grew to hate. I had to remind myself that it was not the 1970s and that I was now living in York 50 years on, a very different city in very different times. York, a city that truly values its historic buildings, and a city that is looking to better, more environmentally friendly future, looking to a future where the car is no longer king and where more sustainable buildings should be built, and the more sustainable transport policy are the hope for the future. The Castle Gateway plan is a great step forward for the city, a plan that is going to take away a hideous castle car park and to show respect to the historic buildings that sit alongside St George's Field, to create a forward-looking vision for this wonderful part of the city. But the Castle Gateway project is not contingent on this huge and expensive building being accepted. There must be better alternatives to this, and that should be considered at a future date. But this huge building, as it presently stands, does not look to the future, and if this building is built, I firmly believe it will become a much-hated relic of the past. It's too large, too dominant, and will have a hugely harmful impact on key strategic assets that surround it. This is the wrong building for St George's Field. The National Planning Policy Framework provides you with firm and clear guidance on why you should reject this application. The letter from Historic England lists a whole series of paragraphs. However, NPPF 193 and 194 in particular make it plain that the greater the importance of the heritage monument, the greater the weight in favour of their conservation and the setting in which they sit. Finally, I hope you reject this application as it represents a backward step on so many levels.
Thank you very much for your contribution. And at this point, I don't see any questions from members. So thank you, Mr. Hayes, for joining us this evening, and I've no doubt that you'll watch with interest as this debate continues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Andy Kerr, who's speaking on behalf of the applicant and therefore in support of the application. Can you hear me, Andy?
I can, yes. Can you hear me?
And we can hear you fine. So please do address the members of the committee. You have up to 3 minutes to do so.
Thank you. I'm Andy Kerr. I'm Head of Regeneration for City of York Council, and I'm the programme lead for the regeneration of the Castle Gateway. There are two planning applications before you tonight, which both represent major milestones in the delivery of the Regeneration Master Plan. The Castle Gateway sits on the confluence of the Ouse and Foss and includes an array of York's heritage assets and cultural attractions which are of regional and national historical importance. However, it is also an area of dereliction and unrealised potential, dominated by cars and surface level car parks and carved in two by the city's inner ring road. As a major landowner in the area, the council holds the key to unlocking the regeneration through the development of our land assets and using the financial returns to provide new public realm and infrastructure. The master plan for the area was approved in 2018 and was developed through a bold new approach to public engagement and with detailed input from key stakeholders through a Castle Gateway advisory group. The result is an exciting master plan that has extensive support, proposals that celebrate the city's heritage and balance the public's desire for high quality public realm with commercial development opportunities that help fund that ambition. The centrepiece of the proposals will be the redevelopment of Castle Car Park to provide a public space at the heart of the Castle Gateway. The two applications considered tonight are interrelated and represent the first phase of development, which provides the key building blocks in delivering the master plan. The first application is St George's Field, which will provide the replacement car parking that would allow the closure and transformation of Castle Car Park. This would reduce the overall level of car parking in this part of the city, remove vehicle journeys from within the inner ring road, and allow the creation of a new public space at the base of Clifford's Tower. The use of St George's Field as replacement parking was actually driven by the public engagement in developing the master plan, where many people identified this as the ideal location. It is currently a large existing surface level car park with a vast area of tarmac that fills the whole space, with no alternative development uses as its functioning floodplain. The new multi-storey car park will concentrate the parking provision into a much smaller footprint, significantly reduce the level of hard standing, bringing in areas of grass and planting to soften the visual impact of the setting. The proposals have had to respond to significant site constraints from avoiding major Yorkshire water sewers, working with the Environment Agency's flood infrastructure and access requirements, and responding to the important heritage environment. This has required innovative design to respond to these challenges. The open ground floor will be allowed to flood so as not to impact on the functioning floodplain, with access to remaining parking at first floor level. It also contains a number of key sustainability features, including a significantly higher provision of electrical vehicle charging than required, photovoltaic solar panels, and a living green wall. It's also been designed with complete focus on its important heritage setting, with the use of natural materials and ensuring that it sits well below the tree line of New Walk through the loss of a story during the design process. We're hopeful the committee can support this officer recommendation to approve the first major step in the delivery of the Castle Gateway Master Plan. I'm happy to take any questions, and I've also got the project architect and planning consultant from BDP to assist me if needed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pavlovic and then Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andy, for your presentation. And I'll go to the point that I raised with Becky regarding the security of this site and therefore its overall sustainability. What discussions did you have with North Yorkshire Police about their concerns?
Yeah, so we had a number of pre-app discussions with them to try and resolve the issue. I think the key issue for them is that they would like to see the car park secured at a ground floor level. The issue obviously with that has been relayed earlier is that the ground floor has to be allowed to flood. It's functioning floodplain, and any inclusion of a fence around the car park would cause flood debris, and it would impact on flood flows through the area, which would have been unacceptable to the Environment Agency. And on top of that, it's a 24-hour car park, so people would be able to access the car park anyway. So effectively be fencing off an area which anybody could get access to, as obviously it is a 24-hour car park. I think to pick up the points, what we're seeking to do to respond to that is what is standard for 24-hour car parks. I mean, we're certainly not aware of any or very few that are staffed overnight or continue to be staffed overnight. And those are basically controlled by 24-hour CCTV. And what we're proposing is that the council's security contractors, Goff and Kelly, will patrol the car park regularly. There'll be a clear lighting strategy in there and all those things required to make it feel an open and safe car park. I'd also add that we're going to be the operator of that car park as the council, and obviously we've got a much wider remit in the success of the area. We're not a private operator who cares only about that car park. It's obviously hugely important to us to make sure that we're not encouraging antisocial behaviour and that we respond to any concerns quickly as a local authority.
Want to ask a follow-up to that, Councillor Pavlovic?
Certainly do.
Yeah.
When they were talking about the illegitimate uses and antisocial behaviour, which will take over to the detriment of the site's intended purpose, what were they alluding to? I
mean, I obviously can't speak on their behalf from the submission that they've put in. I understand their concerns might have been around it being an area people may go into to maybe use drugs or rough sleep. Obviously, a well-lit environment that has got good natural surveillance as it's been designed and then matched with monitored 24-hour CCTV would allow us to then quickly react to that with our security patrols.
Go on.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your indulgence on this. But Goff and Kelly, or whoever it is that you've got there as security, will be covering that on a cycle. There will be the risk of street drinking, of rough sleeping, and of, as you say, illegitimate drug use and drug dealing. When you've talked about the putting in of CCTV cameras, who's made the assessment? Because I've you know, and I'm declaring an interest. I've had 20 years as working within criminal justice, so I think I've got some inkling of the points I'm trying to raise with you here, or some background of the points I'm trying to raise with you here. Is I've looked at the floor plans of the car parks, and I can see numerous dead spots there that won't be covered by CCTV. So how are you going to make that a safe and secure environment at night when patrons or people who've used that car park are trying to access their car at night?
So in terms of the CCTV, I mean, that will come in the next detailed design to make sure that there aren't those dead spots. I mean, I guess the only point I can echo is that obviously 24-hour car parks are a regular thing. I mean, we've got many surface level car parks, but there are other multi-storey car parks, and this is a way that they are all managed.
Yeah, but this is an isolated site.
In terms of access?
No, it's in terms of where it is.
I think, but the building itself wouldn't then be isolated, because obviously that would be covered.
Well, what's it got near it?
So you mean from the perspective that there may be more people in that area wanting to use it for those purposes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I can only reiterate how we would seek to manage that and how other 24-hour car parks are managed. It's obviously something that we'll look at as an applicant, and we'll continue to monitor security throughout and respond. And obviously, as in our role as local authority and through community safety partnerships and others, we can obviously continue to make sure that there are no issues and address them as soon, if any, arrived.
But you're not prepared to consider 24-hour a day security?
I'm sure
on-site security.
If an issue developed and that was something we needed to respond to, I'm sure as a local authority we would do that.
Okay, Councillor Pavlovic, thank you. I'm
thank
sure
you.
That you've
thank you, Chair. Thank you.
You've taken that as far as it's helpful to at this point in time. Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to paragraph 5.28, which makes mention of the engagement with city centre businesses and retailers, saying they made it clear they would only support the closure of Castle Car Park if alternative city centre car parking was provided. I just wondered if you could say more about the nature of that engagement, whether it was with individual businesses, whether it was with the Business Improvement District, Retail Forum, and whether that was a sort of a consensus view. Would just be helpful to understand a bit more about the nature and outputs of that engagement. Thank you.
Yeah, we've undertaken a huge amount of public engagement on this. We've trialled a completely new approach to public engagement through the My Castle Gateway project, and that's allowed us through social media and face-to-face events to gather a huge amount of feedback on the master plan and then the proposals. In terms of there's a whole range of people in terms of car parking. Someone would like to see less car parking, someone would like to see more car parking. In terms of businesses, city centre businesses, there's a very strong voice around making sure that we retain city centre car parking. The York Retail Forum were actually absolutely unequivocal that they would only support the master plan if there was replacement car parking provided for the closure of Castle Car Park. That's been echoed by the bid, so we've worked with all those stakeholders, and then we've had a number of individual retailers. Let's pick an example, Phoenix, who again, their support of the master plan was absolutely conditional on there being replacement car parking put in place. We are reducing the amount of car parking though. We are conscious of doing that. We are removing it from being a ring road. It is a step forward in terms of there being less car parking, but it is something that's been a very strong voice in the business community to ensure there is some replacement car parking.
Thank you. Councillor Lomas and then Councillor Daubney.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a slightly different question about trees. I'm just keen to understand where the replacement trees are going to be put. What will their nature be? Will they be mature trees? Will they be similar in height and spread to the trees that are being removed? Will they fit what has been shown on the visualizations from their planting, or is that something that you're suggesting is you know, years into the future that we'll have that level of tree coverage?
Yeah, so obviously we've got a tree planting strategy. I mean, we're more than happy to look to put in some more mature versions of trees. That does make a difference, clearly. In terms of, we're obviously planting a lot more than is being lost. What we did work really, really hard to do is make sure there was no impact on New Walk, no loss of trees at all down New Walk, and we have managed to limit to the absolute minimum the number that we do have to affect. Unfortunately, there is that one big lime tree that's the one of sort of real height that is affected, but it is right on the footprint of the car park, and the roots would be affected adversely. But again, we remain, this is part of a master plan for the area, we remain absolutely committed to this. I think the other thing is ensuring that we as a local authority are planting trees as well alongside mature trees for when they need those future tree management. So yeah, just to reiterate that if we need to put more mature species, we're more than happy to do that as an applicant.
Okay, I said I'd then go to Councillor Daubney and Councillor Willis, and then I'll come to Councillor Waters. I have noticed you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Daubney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. The advantage I can see of here, this multi-storey car park, is that clearly so often during the winter times, we find that St George's Field is in flood and therefore is unable to be used as a car park entirely. I just wanted to check, obviously with an entrance of first floor level, the lower level can be left for sacrificial flooding, Andy. But I assume there's also going to be safety barriers, locked gates or whatever to make sure that when that lower level is in flood, then there's no access to it by the public. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Should there be any risk of flooding, the ground floor would be closed off completely and not accessible. And that would obviously be managed because it will be a staff facility again. And so through the daytime, we obviously work to flood any flood risk, flood warning, and then we'll respond to that and put the barriers in place.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Willis and then Councillor Waters.
Thank you. Andy, just lifting it away just slightly from the specifics on the car park, could you just talk me through the bigger master plan? Because in my head, we're getting rid of the huge car park that's right in the middle of the city and turning that into a fabulous green space. We're using the St George's Field more effectively than it currently is, whilst also increasing vegetation. Could you just talk me through that? Because that's where it fits in, is it?
Yeah, so it's obviously at the moment St George's Field is a large surface level car park. The multi-storey car park will have a much smaller footprint, not least because of the Yorkshire Water sewer that we're having to avoid, which has led us to that smaller footprint. And that's meant that we're releasing significant area in that space for green space. It is quite an unattractive area, St George's Field at the moment. And obviously there'd be a significant amount of planting that goes on to improve that whole area and lift the whole area as part of the wider master plan. Then the key message, I guess, for St George's Field is it is that replacement car parking that does allow Castle Car Park to close. So this is very much the sort of stepping stones to the delivery at the heart of the master plan. And St George's Field is needed to provide the replacement car parking that releases Castle Car Park and allows us to turn that into that really high quality public space for the city, which does sit at the very heart of our heritage assets, which are currently surrounded by a pretty poor quality car park, but one that is very popular. But the other thing is it's taking it outside of the inner ring road as well, so it's consistent with our strategies to try and reduce vehicles within the city centre core and historic core, but taking them outside the inner ring road, so we feel it's a better location for more concentrated parking, while reducing the overall amount of car parking as a move towards sustainable transport measures.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to what Councillor Pavlovich raised with the police and the future management, I appreciate that you missed the first application, but there could quite easily be a similar condition placed upon this, that the development was not allowed to commence until such time as the future management and security of the site was approved with the reasonable satisfaction of North Yorkshire Police. The second point in relation to what Councillor Lomas had raised about trees, we ought to be insisting on evergreen, large trees like evergreen oaks for screening.
Councillor Waters, I appreciate your comments, but we're verging into debate, I think, rather than questions. So if you have a question,
have asked those questions as supplementaries, but the biggest question I've got tonight, and it's in relation to both linked applications, and this is going back to the various comments by the conservation architects of the City of York Council and Historic England, and I would just want to ask the project manager why we haven't got the council's conservation architect here tonight to answer questions. We must have anticipated that there would be questions in relation to the height and massing of this building and the extra impact of the solar panels on the roof. Personally, I think as councillors, we are being had for fools tonight. We should have had the conservation architect here.
Becky, you've joined us and
yeah,
attracted my attention. Please.
Thank you. That's not for the applicant. That's for me. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we can return to that in a moment. I'm
yeah,
sure.
well, just one point with that. We seem to be trying to distance the fact that the applicant is the City of York Council. I shall return to it later if need be.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's noted. I've got both Councillor Baker and Councillor Kilbane. Councillor Baker first.
Thanks, Chair. This is a question for Andy, I think, and going back to the sort of clarity that Councillor Widdowson gave about trying to link the two applications, and the many times that Andy you've explained this linkage to us, and the link that I'm going to get at and ask about for clarity on is to do with the public benefits from the public realm and the improved cycling and pedestrian infrastructure and all of that will come from the second application to mitigate the car park being built. But I'd just really like you to correct me if I'm wrong, because I find that in paragraph 5.32 there's a clear statement that says the public transforming the area around Clifford's Tower into a vibrant area of public realm. At the end of 5.32, it says we can't secure that. That is not, removing the cars is one thing, we've secured that, but we cannot secure the public benefits of all the rest of that being developed. And then immediately in paragraph 5.33, it words something slightly different by saying officers are satisfied that adequate mechanisms are in place to ensure the delivery of the public benefits identified above. So I just wondered if you can give any reassurance as to which ones you're saying that we really can't secure, and why officers have then said that the public benefits, there are adequate mechanisms to ensure them. They don't quite marry up in my mind.
Is it possible to respond to that?
I'm not sure that one's for me as an applicant,
Okay.
because obviously that's the view that planning officers have come to.
Again, I mean, maybe hold that one, Councillor Baker, until
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
address further questions to officers. Okay, thanks. Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks,
sorry,
Chair.
just hold on for a moment, because I can see that Councillor Pavlovic has a supplementary on that.
Yeah, can I just ask for a point of order, Chair? Are we talking about these as linked applications? Because there's reference to the second application and this application as being part of some wider master plan. I thought our job was to consider each application on its merits, not on what its wider implications for the city might be.
we are looking at this application, but as with any application, we have to look at it in its context.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cobain.
Oh, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Andy. You're earning your money tonight. This might be a question for the architect, I think. I'm just curious what the floor to ceiling heights are in the proposed car park, and I'm asking the question because I'm wondering how easily it could be converted into dwellings.
Yeah, I'll let Steve come in and answer that. The only point I'll just make on conversion to dwellings, the only challenge we've got with this site is because it's functioning flood zone. It's highly unlikely to ever be accepted by the Environment Agency for residential development. It was something we looked at originally, whether there could be some form of alternative use for it to future-proof a car park, but that is one of the challenges with this site. It obviously already is a car park, and we're able to deal with the flood issues by having that open ground floor, but it probably would preclude the use as residential. But Steve may be able to answer the floor one for you if you want that.
Yeah, hi everybody, it's Steve Marshall here, BDP. Yeah, I mean the floor to floor height is 3 meters with a clearance of around about 2.1 meters, so it's a kind of standard car park floor to floor height. But as Andy says, the principle of conversion to residential was kind of discounted because of the nature of the site as a functioning floodplain. We did at least design the building to have a flat deck. So there is the potential for other uses to slot in there if we do find another viable use. So that's as much as we could do. Actually, increasing the height of the building beyond that wasn't seen as a viable proposition.
Thank you. I've got just a quick question. I just like some clarification on the impact of parking for coaches. This is one of the key sites for coach parking in the city. Can you just clarify what the impact of this is for coach parking?
Yeah, of course. There's currently 27 coach parking spaces, and we're actually going to be providing 25. So there's a net loss of 2. But the coach parking spaces that will be re-provided are big enough and to take modern coaches, which our existing ones aren't. So although there is a slight reduction in the number of spaces, there'll be larger modern ones and well designed, suitable for sort of modern coaches to arrive.
And you've indicated a number of places that would be lost. Do we have any idea of the use of those spaces? How often are those spaces fully occupied in the course of a year?
That's a good question. I've not got that information to hand, and I don't want to guess.
Okay. Just by observation, I've rarely seen it full, but it is a busy car park, and through the summer months it is well used. I think we've exhausted questions. So thank you very much for joining us. And as you realise by now, you'll be able to follow the rest of this meeting through the live stream. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the opportunity to take the points that have come up there back to officers, and there were 1 or 2 occasions when we noted that would be a helpful thing to do. Thank you, Becky, for joining us again. Do you want to respond to those points?
Yeah, I'm just going to come in because
Please.
Originally I said that there was a condition with regard to security. It's accidentally been missed off, so I'd ask you to add a security condition as part of that. So that's hands up, that does need adding, and we can add that. We can add a security condition. Going back to the points that Councillor Widdowson raised, I've done a bit of digging in the background in terms of other multi-storey car parks in York, and the vast majority aren't staffed. They do have CCTV and they have a customer centre. So say a buzzer on the wall, for example, where you can press and somebody will help you 24 hours a day, but they're not staffed in the ones in York as was asked. In terms of I'm trying to remember everything now. In terms of the question of the conservation architect, I felt that their consultation response and how it had been summarised in the report was sufficient to illustrate their strength of feeling, and that's all available for members to see, and that the balance has been made from a planning point of view, that we were happy with the proposals. That's just by way of an explanation. I can't remember the rest, so you might have to come back to me for the rest.
I'm sure members will remind you. Councillor Waters was attracting my attention first, and then Councillor Lomas. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thanks to Becky for explaining that. I was looking for a condition in relation to security and management, and I couldn't find it. So, do you think it would be acceptable if we had a similar condition to what we put on in the first application for future management and security of the site would have to be to the satisfaction of the reasonable satisfaction of North Yorkshire Police? And I appreciate if one of their major concerns is the fact that it's open, it wouldn't be reasonable to withhold permission on that basis.
I think that we could word a condition that would work with them, but I don't think it would be reasonable to add them to that condition, given that the concerns that they've said to us in terms of the fact that it's all open. So we won't actually ever overcome that aspect of their concerns. But again, absolutely, we could have, and I wouldn't necessarily put it on a condition, but I'd put it as an informative to say that we would work with the police architectural liaison officer to come to a best possible solution as part of that condition.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Sorry, I certainly couldn't accept an informative on something as important as this, because as we've learnt in the past, informatives are merely gentlemen's agreements.
Okay, that's been heard. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you. I'm not sure which officer would be best to answer this, but it is about parking. I note that in the paperwork we've got, it says that there will be 26 blue badge spaces. I wonder if somebody could tell me how many blue badge spaces there currently are in Castle Car Park, how many blue badge spaces in the access road to the Castle Car Park, how many blue badge spaces have been lost in the on-street areas because of the recent extension of foot streets on that side of the city centre. So that would be the mainly, I think that Castlegate would be close to that. So it's just a question on that.
I'm going to have to bring Helen in on that. I don't know that necessarily the aspects that you're talking about in terms of Castlegate are directly relevant to this scheme, but Helen might know the answer. I'm afraid I don't, sorry.
Whatever light you can shed on this, please do. Thank you,
I was
Helen.
trying to quickly find the number for Castlegate, but I don't actually have it. But I could look it up and come back to you on the exact number. In terms of what has been taken out of the Foot Street area, yes, as you say, it would be Castlegate, and it's on double yellows, and it'd be about probably 10 to 15 spaces if Radio was parked all along Castlegate. But I can look at Castle Car Park. I don't have the exact number to hand, but I can come back.
It would be interesting and helpful to note the overall.
Chair, if I can just come back in,
yeah, please do.
On that particular one, it does surprise me that we are told in the paperwork that this is a direct replacement for the spaces being lost in Castle Car Park, but we weren't given the information about how many spaces were being lost in Castle Car Park. I'm talking there specifically about blue badge spaces.
Okay.
I think it is just, sorry, I think it is just worth pointing out there that the foot streets, the restrictions are temporary. So they in terms of what we're looking at, they're only a temporary restriction, whereas this, yes, I understand the point about the Castle Car Park. We'll look that up for you, but the other ones are temporary. So in planning terms, you couldn't really give that a lot of weight there because it's not directly linked to this. Okay.
Chair,
I'll let you come back on that, please.
Yeah, please, because I'm aware that the initial plan for Foot Streets was temporary, but any residents watching this who have seen any of the local news recently will know that actually there is an announcement has been made this week that there will be a consultation on making some of the restrictions permanent. So I do believe it's relevant, and also the spaces that are in the access road to the car park, whether they will be preserved or lost. I assume lost, but they need to be counted as well.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Chair. Becky, just to reiterate my question again in the wrong place a few minutes ago, just could you provide clarity on the fact that you've acknowledged that the public benefits of transforming the space around the Clifford's Tower into a flexible, multi-purpose, vibrant area of public realm cannot be secured through this application. I understand that. But then in paragraph 533, you've said that officers are satisfied that adequate mechanisms are in place to ensure the delivery of the public benefits that would mitigate the harm of a multi-storey car park on heritage assets. So can you just clarify for me again, is that just your planning balance, even though you can't secure any of the public benefits?
We can, because condition 33 says within 3 months of St George's Field multi-storey car park becoming operational, Castle Car Park, and it identifies a number, it said shall be permanently closed and ticket machines and associated car parking removed. So it does secure the removal of that car park as part of this permission. Then what comes forward after that is, again, as Councillor Widdowson talked about, the master plan, and that's all relevant, taking it into account, is exactly what will form. But yes, it does. It will take away that car park, and that's where we've come for in terms of the planning balance and the benefit that you remove that car park from directly under God, I've lost the word. You know where it is, but so it's the benefit there.
Sure. Rachel, did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. It was just to say that the report was trying to make the point that while you can remove the cars, by the implementation of this permission, you cannot secure the transformation into the public realm. That will come forward as a future planning application when the details have been worked up. So it was just trying to say that the public benefits detailed above can be secured, but that is the one element that will come as a future application is submitted and determined.
That's very clear. Thank you for
Thanks,
that.
Rachel.
And Helen, was there something more you wanted to?
I just found the numbers. So it's 31 disabled bays in Castle Car Park.
31 disabled bays in Castle Car Park. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Widdowson.
I've just got 2 points that I'd just like to try and make. Becky, I'm assuming from the different conversations with Rosie and other people on the call, on the meeting, that the development of this car parking site has had a material consideration of the whole of that space that we keep talking about. I know it can't secure it, but the other pieces, it's part of a jigsaw that helps us move that entire area forward.
Yes, it's being considered as a whole in terms of the planning balance and through the securing of the condition. Yeah.
Okay, and the only other point, and Chair, I don't know whether I'm in the wrong part of the meeting for this, so feel free to slap my wrist. Just to Councillor Lomas's point, whilst the foot streets have been closed for the pandemic, there have also been a significant number of increase of blue badge spaces right the way throughout the city, both along outside the Minster, inside of the car parks, and in many other places, so that the blue badge holders were not disadvantaged.
Okay. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, coming back to foot streets, I wonder if I can ask Helen. I think maybe Councillor Widdowson touched on this as well. The latest information I have as a city centre councillor in the last 24, if not 48 hours, from the executive member for transport, surprised me really because I hadn't been consulted or even known about this, is that there are things afoot there, literally on the foot streets, and that they may be changing. So it's for Becky to say that it is definitely temporary. I'm finding now that that might not be the case. So Helen, can you just give us an update on exactly, as we've touched on foot streets, exactly what your understanding is about the number of disabled spaces there may or may not be, or what might be happening about foot streets that might relate to this?
Can I come in just in answer to I said definitely temporary. That was it from that's at this moment in time that it's temporary. That's the information that I gave. I'm not saying forever. That's from the information at this point in time. It's temporary. Sorry, I just wanted to come in to clarify what I'd said.
We understand. We understand. Yeah. Helen, did you want to?
I can explain where we are at the moment, which I think was in the local press, which is that we are looking to councillors to make a decision on the future of the food streets to continue with temporary closures until 8 p.m. potentially, whilst the COVID situation remains, to enable the hospitality industry to keep their cafe, pavement cafe areas. But then later on, as hopefully we recover, then there would be potentially plans to include Blake Street, Lendal, Castlegate, Colliergate, and part of Goodrum Gate into the food streets area until 5 p.m. But this is not decided yet, and there would be consultation on these changes if it's decided that we want to progress with these. So there's a whole process to follow. It's not been decided.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, you've raised your hand. Can you just clarify for me, is this relevant to the issue immediately at hand, or is it a fresh question?
Supplementary question regarding the disabled parking provision. And just to use that favoured word of officers, do they consider it reasonable to have these disabled parking places approximately 500 to 600 yards away from the city centre and about another 250 yards away from where the parking provision on the Castle car park was?
Okay, thank you for that. I'm struggling a little to see. It's a question which may, I think, probably a question that's best left hanging because it's not directly relevant to our consideration of this application. We may be considering quite feasibly the number of spaces allocated as blue badge spaces within the car park, but the question I think relates to a broader conversation, which is an important one, but is not exact. What is an issue just at this moment? I'll allow you to try to raise it a different way, Councillor Waters.
What is the purpose of the 26 disabled parking spaces at this application? They are so far away from anything that anybody would reasonably be expected to access as to make them virtually pointless.
I think that's your opinion, Councillor Waters, and as officers we don't agree with that.
Okay. Well, has any assessment been made on how far it's considered reasonable for disabled people to walk, stumble, be pushed to access the facilities that they would normally want to access in a city like York?
I think that we've heard that point, and it's part of our consideration, but I'm not sure that it's directly relevant. It's indirectly relevant to what we're discussing at the moment. Councillor Douglas.
I think this is a question for Helen. It's about the highways comment on page 74. It says the transport assessment doesn't include a sufficiently robust assessment of the road safety implications of the larger car park. So Helen, can you tell us what's been done around that, please?
Well, there was a bit more work carried out, and then we have asked for a condition for a full road safety audit if the application was to be permitted.
Thank you. There are no other raised hands at this point, so we move into debate, and I'm very happy with Councillor Fenton. You'd like to make a start for us, please?
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful if we could start by picking up the point around the missing condition on security, because I think that clearly is an issue that has been picked up in the questioning. So I suppose if there isn't a pre-existing drafted condition, then I think it falls to us to propose one. And there've been suggestions around looking to set a condition around coming to an agreement with the police, and the point was made around but some of the things the police were objecting to we couldn't address because of the open nature of the ground floor. But we clearly do need a condition that means the local authority would, I think in consultation with the police, would need to be satisfied with the security arrangements that were to be put in place at the car park, including but not limited to CCTV. And the applicant did say that if those reasonably secured security measures then turned out not to be effective at tackling any antisocial behaviour that may arise, then the council, as the operator of the car park, would look at alternative and additional measures, and that may include, an increase in patrols or possibly a sort of permanently staffed arrangement. I think on that last point, that gives me comfort that if it does turn out to be problematic, then that's an option. I wouldn't necessarily condition that from the start, but I think we need to kind of hold on to that and recognise that statement that was made. So that's
okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Pavlik, I'm going to just keep you on pause for a moment, if you will.
It was a supplementary to that point.
It is. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. But given that we've heard there is a condition that was lost, as it were, is it possible to hear the wording of that? It's unfortunate that this was a slip up. I'll give you moments to find it. In the meantime,
ask something else in the meantime, and I'll come back.
Go ahead, Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, in many respects, I would absolutely agree with Councillor Fenton. My one qualm and the trepidation that I have about agreeing either with the consent or to the satisfaction of the police, or which I think would be helpful, and not a 24-hour-a-day staffing, is I have a real fear that reputations are easily lost and very difficult to get back. And if the multi-storey gets a reputation as being an unsafe environment, it will be very difficult then to attract visitors who may come once, feel unsafe, and will never want to park there again. And so my view would be that whatever condition we put in place from the outset. And you've heard my view that my view would be the condition should be 24-hour. It should be staffed at night.
We've heard your concerns. Heidi, you, I think, attempted to join us, and I'm hoping you might help us here.
Yeah, I know Becky needed a few moments, so I thought it might be a good time just to provide some advice. In relation to the condition, Councillor Pavlovic, you weren't able to be there on the last application. We added in some wording to say to the reasonable satisfaction. And one of the 6 tests with conditions is whether something's reasonable in all other aspects. And in this situation, I don't feel that wording that we used last time is reasonable, because essentially the police consultant had an issue with the design, principally about the design. So I don't think that wording is correct. But that's not to say that some wording couldn't be worked up to strengthen that condition. But I think to the reasonable satisfaction would never be achieved. I can't see them moving, and it's a principal objection to that openness. So in this circumstance, I don't think it does work. I also wanted to mention in relation to decision making, you have to base it on the facts as they are now. So given that footpaths may or may not become permanently shut, is something that you shouldn't be taking into account. You have to take the facts as they are right now. And what was my other? Any decision should it be based on moral objection? So fears of crime are a material consideration, but only where there is evidence to show that that fear is based in reality. And I hope that assists. I know Councillor Lomas has got questions probably for me.
I'll allow Councillor Lomas and then Councillor Pavlovic again.
Thank you, Heidi. Just you mentioned there we need to base our decision on the facts as they are today, But we did hear from Helen that there is the intention to consult on extending the Foot Street's closure to traffic, if you like, to Castlegate in the longer term. So to me, can I reasonably assume that that is a fact as it is today, that consultation is going ahead, in the same way that there's a consultation going ahead on how and plans are going to be put in place later on how to use the Castle car park site once the car parking aspect is removed from it?
So absolutely, I'm not sure what stage it's at, and it's for you as decision making to give weight to that. So if the consultation has taken place, then I think you can give some weight to that. Obviously, the decision hasn't been made, so Helen may need to confirm if it is still one of the options. If it's, because I know she said the intention, at what stage is that and what weight you could give to that. But yeah, certainly if it's at a more advanced stage, then you would expect that a decision maker would give more weight to that. That's correct.
Can I just, do you want me to come back in here for
do,
your
Becky,
security
yeah.
condition? So it would be, before the development's brought into use, a scheme for security measures at the site would be submitted to and approved in writing to the local planning authority. Then to go back to your point about the request for 24-hour staffing, that from a planning point of view just isn't reasonable, because there's enough other measures in place that we could secure via that condition that would be perfectly reasonable and would achieve a suitable level of security at that car park. So that's my advice, that I don't think anything other than that would be reasonable. That condition is acceptable. Well, in my opinion, that condition is acceptable and you could achieve sufficient. You've got to think about what else there is already in the town centre. There's multiple other car parks that aren't manned 24/7. Is it reasonable to ask this specific one to be 24-hour manned? No, would be my answer to you for that one.
Okay, thanks for that.
But it is reasonable to put that condition on, as I've just said.
I did say I'd come back to Councillor Pavlovic and Councillor Fenton. You also have a supplementary, so I'll take them in that order. Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you. To address Heidi's point relating to fear of crime as it stands, well, you're talking about the city centre. The city centre has is an acknowledged area that has a significant problem with street drinking, with rough sleeping, and with drug use. So I'm not clear why you think that it's not relevant when we're talking about a city centre car park.
Oh, I wasn't saying it wasn't relevant. I think the question was raised early on, can we take fear of crime into account as material consideration? And my point was, yes, you can, but not just on a sort of moral basis, but there needs to be evidence. And if you're saying there is crime in the city centre, then for me, that would make that as something that you could take into account.
Okay. So you didn't add that. Had you
Sorry.
added that, that would have been very that would have been absolutely relevant, because we are talking about a venue that where it's actually cited, it is a reality.
Absolutely. And and that was my point, is can you take that into account? Yes, you can, where there's evidence.
Yes.
That could be a material consideration. Okay, does that explain?
That's helpful. Councillor Fenton, but before I do, can I just check with Councillor Waters, is your question a supplementary on this, or is it a fresh line of questioning?
It's a supplementary to Becky.
Okay, well, hold it for a moment.
Right.
Councillor Fenton, and I'll come back to you. Okay.
I was going to say thanks to Becky for reading out the proposed condition, which I'm I'm content with. I think it is reasonable. The only amendment I would make would be to add the words "in consultation with the police." I think that that would be helpful. But
that does sound as if it would. That does sound as if it might cover things. Okay.
In consultation with, because ultimately the decision lies with the local planning authority. Heidi's nodding. Heidi's nodding.
It sounds like we're making some progress there.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. The decision may lie with the local planning authority, but the ultimate responsibility, if it goes wrong, will be shoved onto North Yorkshire Police's very full plate. Whether they can cope with it or not is a different matter. But the question I would like to ask of Becky is, what is the relevance of the staffing arrangements at other 24-hour city centre car parks when they are located within the built-up area? And as Councillor Pavlovich has rightly pointed out, this is an isolated location. It will be a magnet for crime if it is not supervised properly.
I think I've made my point clear on that before, that I've given you the advice that I don't think it's reasonable. I can't add anything more to that.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, so we've got Councillors Baker, Hollier and Fenton. I'm going to again take those in turn, please. Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Chair. So I'd just like to open another line of debate and seek other members' views on this. And it's in terms of whether we can be satisfied that the overall size of this proposed development and the car parking numbers that it proposes is in fact minimised as best as it can be, or perhaps whether that could be improved, based on that minimisation being required for the least harmful approach. Now, I fully accept and acknowledge the commitment that's been made to replace parking that will be lost at the Castle car park, but I'm not convinced that we at this point know that we need to replace like for like. And there could be a case, well, I believe there is a case for a fuller citywide car parking capacity study to be done to see whether, yes, of course, we need to replace the lost car parking for all the people that need that car parking and to support city centre businesses for those that are coming in via cars. But is the amount that's being proposed what will be needed? Now, we've got, there is time. I think I'm right in saying that the actual progression of building this car park has been put on hold for, I don't know, half a year. That would be the perfect opportunity to do a car park capacity study and wait for the results of that to see whether we can be satisfied, or whether, you know, we can't. I believe that we can't actually be satisfied right now that this is the right design.
Okay, Councillor Baker, I think you've.
Anybody had comment?
Okay, I think you've put the question there. I don't know if it's possible to make a helpful response to that.
Well, it wasn't a question to officers. It was just a point of debate. Okay.
I don't think we've quite gone into debate yet, because I can see if there have been further questions. I'm assuming. So don't worry at all. But I think there may well still be further questions. Councillor Hollier, then Councillor Fenton.
Apologies, Chair. I don't have a question. I was going to make a point that assumed we had moved into debate. So.
Chair, you did say we'd gone into debate, Chair.
Oh, well, forgive me. And Councillor Baker, forgive me. You've made a point. It wasn't clear to me whether it was a question or not, because you were.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, it's the question. It's me seeking the views of other members, really, on whether they feel satisfied that the overall size and car parking numbers, we feel that it's appropriate at this time, and that perhaps further review of needs of city centre parking across the city could be done. Okay.
Councillor Hollier, then Councillor Fenton.
Thanks, Chair. I was just trying to think really of a sort of way forward. Gave this sort of a few views floating around on the sort of security arrangements. I think, to my mind, just to sort of think about Councillor Baker's point, it's clear really this is a sort of, you know, crucial part of that jigsaw for the wider redevelopment of this area. The main, you know, and I guess to some extent we can always think about you know, whether or not you know, additional thought could be given to these issues over sort of the number of parking spaces, but that'll be true, you know, continuously really. And I think we probably just need to consider the application we've got in front of us, rather than necessarily trying to put things back and, you know, reconsider parts of it. Yeah, I think the main concern really that seems to have been brought up is those security arrangements, and it is a bit of a shame, I guess, that the condition was missed. So all I was really going to suggest was sort of a move approval on the basis of that security condition being delegated to the chair and vice chair, for the wording to be sort of worked up between you two. I guess on the basis of the legal advice that we're getting. So that would be my proposal.
Okay. I'm looking to see if that is seconded. Councillor Daubney was the first hand. Do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second that proposal by Councillor Hollier.
Okay. I'm going to give opportunity to others who've already indicated they want to speak before we take this further. That will include Councillor Waters. I will come to you in a moment. Councillor Fenton has a hand raised, Councillor Pavlovic, Councillor Lomas, Councillor Fitzpatrick, and then I'll come to Councillor Waters. Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on the basis of the the proposal from Councillor Hollier in relation to the wording of the additional condition, I'd be happy to support approval. I think the report and certainly the questions and answers have certainly helped to ease any concerns I had in terms of the balance between the harm that would be caused by the construction of the car park and the benefits that would accrue in terms of the unlocking of the existing castle car park for alternative uses. I mean that there hasn't been as much mention made of the solar array on the roof as I thought there might have been, but I think that's one of the stronger aspects of the building in terms of sustainability, and it's something that I think we should welcome, and also welcome the net reduction in car parking spaces, but also the if it's approved, the potential retention of some car parking spaces close to the city centre, recognising that we do have a retail sector in the city centre, and whereas I go into town, and if I can't fit it in my panniers, I tend not to buy it, but that's not an option for everybody. So I think we do need to recognise that for many city centre businesses, then you know they do rely on customers who don't have an alternative other than to come in by car. So I think the net reduction in numbers, but the availability of this facility is on balance to be supported.
Thank you. Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Chair. Well, basically, to sum up, do I have a problem with there being a multi-storey car park there? No. Do I feel that it would add to the regeneration of that area? Yeah, I'm sure it would. Do I agree that that 24-hour a day staffed car park would be unreasonable? Absolutely not, and I'll tell you for why. The police's use and you know,
Councillor Pavlovic, we lost
circumspectly put.
Councillor Pavlovic.
Hello.
I don't think I'm the only one who lost you just for a few seconds there. So just so that you know,
still there now?
We can hear you fine now. But just if you'd pick up where you were talking about, you would regard 24-hour staffing as reasonable, because.
Yes, yes, and because the police's, you know, the police's objections relating to their fears for the use of that car park, I think, are incredibly well founded. And I made the point earlier that a reputation once lost is going to be very difficult to recover. And I have a feeling that within a few months of this Castle car park opening, this multi-storey opening, you will end up with the biggest, most expensive white elephant that this city's ever had built. It will not be used after dark because it will be used by other people, and it will be used by for purposes that will put people off parking there. And so it floods a dozen days a year, which is when they're saying it would be unreasonable to have the area fenced off. I'm not talking about fenced off. I'm talking about there being a walking patrol to guard the security and safety of the patrons using that car park, and nothing less than that will allow me to support this application. So unless that condition is amended, it's not one that I could personally agree to.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Lomas?
Can I come in here? Sorry, just a quick suggestion that potentially might help.
Okay.
We could add that after 6-9 months of the opening of the car park, that the security measures at the site are reviewed, so that we'd ask to make sure that the measures that are in place are sufficient and that they're working. So maybe that could allay some of the fears that after 6-12 months that the security measures at the site are reviewed, and then that could overcome some concerns. Maybe just
I'd
a thought.
say 3 months.
You've got to give it time to bed in, and people use it. It depends on the
Okay.
time of year. I think 6 would be
Okay.
more
Can
sensible,
I
but that might be a way around it.
It might be a very helpful suggestion. Thank you for that. Can I just note that what has been proposed is that the wording of this is agreed in consultation with the chair and vice chair. Therefore, Councillor Pavlovic, you would have the opportunity, and I'm sure whether we're talking about 3 months, 6 months, or whatever is considered to be appropriate, that would be the time to look at the detail of that. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. And can I just say I'm grateful to all of the officers for persevering and answering all my various questions. I have looked earlier on, reading through all the information. I have looked at what we're being asked to do, and I've looked at the assessment that has been made by officers under various headings, and I have a few points. So the transport assessment is the first area I looked at with concern, and a new piece of information was shared with us this evening that the highways works are not LTN 120 compliant because there's no dedicated cycle route, which adds to my concern. But my separate concern was about the accessibility issues relating to disabled users. So there are 26 blue badge spaces planned in replacement for the blue badge spaces currently in Castle Car Park. There are currently 31 blue badge spaces in Castle Car Park, and on the Tower Street access road, I believe there are a further 5 dedicated blue badge spaces, plus space for on-street double yellow line parking, and that's before we even get to looking at the spaces that Helen told us it was the intention to remove for the longer term in Castlegate itself. So that's 31 plus 5, that's 36, plus a potentially up to 10 to 15 in Castlegate. So there is a net significant loss of blue badge spaces. I also want to point out that these are blue badge spaces for disabled people who need to have a blue badge in order that they can park close by what the things that they need to access. So saying that you've created extra spaces in other parts of the city centre, those are not replacements, because you can't say, well, we put extra spaces in Monk Bar car park and expect that to be a replacement for a parking space in Castlegate, because somebody who needs a blue badge cannot locomote themselves across that distance. I also note that the proposed development is twice as far away from the central shopping areas as the current spaces in the Castle car park. So I think it's a matter opinion whether that means that that is sufficient or not, but I would suggest not if it's twice as far away, and using the various assessments that are in place to assess whether somebody warrants a blue badge. That's around 50 metres of independent locomotion. So I would say that putting replacement car parking spaces 250 metres further away from the central shopping area isn't a good enough adequate replacement. So that's the bit on transport. The other bit is in the designing out crime. And I suppose I take a slightly different view of this from Councillor Pavlovic. So the assessment says effectively, and I'm paraphrasing, that the council would respond to provide staffing and security if it was needed due to crime issues. But the clue is in the title of this. It is the principle is to design out crime, and where you know that a building design is likely to allow, enable or encourage criminal activity, then you should seek to design it out and not later go back in and put in place security to deal with the problem that you have created by your design. So I'm not convinced on that, even if we were to have some kind of assessment after 6 months or something about how much crime we've created with the design. But the final one that I am really concerned about is the harm to heritage assets, which are significant and they're very close. And the reason why I asked the questions about trees was not necessarily because I didn't think that the applicant was going to be planting trees to replace the ones that were removed. I absolutely accept they will be planting more trees than the number they are removing. And we were told tonight it was even more than what was in the papers, which is great. But the trees are being presented as essentially screening to minimise the harm that this building will do to the nearby heritage assets. And I heard nothing this evening that convinced me that either the visual representations we were shown were actual trees or that they will be in place when the building is finished and unveiled. So for me, there will be harm to the heritage assets, specifically on the side where the prison and the outdoor part of the prison building is, which will look over onto the building with its replacement trees that patently won't be tall and broad in their spread and providing the cover and shielding of the building that's been suggested. I think that in the assessment of harm to heritage assets, I go back to something that we've discussed previously in planning. It's not enough for me to say that what is currently there is harmful to the heritage assets. A bit less bad than terrible is still bad. So if we are looking at something which in its design harms our significant heritage assets, which are there in this area, there's a group of, then we should not approve it. And for those reasons, I cannot support approval.
Thank you. Before I move on, some minutes ago, I was my attention was being attracted by Councillor Fisher, and I wondered. I mean, it clearly wasn't supplementary to what was being said, and you've raised your hand now. I wondered if it was something I needed to be aware of.
It was going to be supplementary, but I decided to raise it at a separate point later on.
Okay. So, in order, I've still got Councillor Baker, Councillor Fitzpatrick. I said I would then go to Councillor Waters, and the number of others who I will come to in a moment. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to both Councillor Hollier and Councillor Lomas and Councillor Pavlovic for their views both ways for approval or not supporting this as it stands. And I take your point, Councillor Hollier, about not looking back at figures about car parking numbers that have already been assessed. But I would like to propose an alternative that is to defer this, since the opportunity is there. Since the executive has said they are not going to progress this scheme until next summer, there is an opportunity to for them to, the applicant to come back in that time, having done a full car parking assessment of the city, to see whether this design is actually not as needed as this big, which would then mitigate some of the harm that you're talking about, Councillor Lomas. I don't know if that's the case, but there is time there. And in that period, there would also be time to look back at the concerns over the traffic impacts and make sure that the road safety audit is covering all that it needs to cover. So I would recommend deferral, proposed deferral.
Okay, Councillor Baker, thank you for that. That might be helpful a little later in the event that what has been proposed and seconded isn't successful. But we do have to deal with that first, rather than taking a different proposal. You'll fully understand that, I know. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Well, I've got some sympathy with what Councillor Baker just said, but we'll come to that later. I think, yeah, we are talking about the reputation of the city. And as a city centre councillor, I work with the police every day. I talk to public protection. I'm very involved in all the foot streets discussion. And I just think two things, really. Certainly in terms of crime, there's no doubt about it. It's going to be a dangerous place, absolutely dangerous. I'm also concerned about the vulnerable people who might choose to go in there and sleep there, and they will. There's no doubt about that. And then added to that, the worst case scenario, we might have flooding. I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about the kind of accidents that might occur for vulnerable people caught up in all of that. I'm not convinced by waiting 3 months for a condition on it. I think the point made by Councillor Lomas about, you design something right from the start. You don't try and bring things in after the event. That's about the reputation of it. And I mean, if the reputation is lost for that car park right from the start, the businesses might as well forget it, quite honestly, because nobody will come and park there. So I would think that businesses would want to actually have something that was right from the very beginning. I also am concerned about disability, and I am concerned about parking. And as I am involved in the foot streets debate, I think all that is uncertain at the moment. We're not absolutely clear about that, really. I know that there's going to be another review coming up soon on that, so we don't know what the numbers are. And as Councillor Waters said, actually, would somebody who is in a wheelchair, who might be independent, because most people who are disabled want to be independent. So it would be a person alone parking there, possibly, trying to get themselves into town. There are all kinds of issues about how far away that is, how suitable that's going to be. So I've got quite a lot of concerns, really. So I'm at the moment, it's either for me a deferral or against.
Thank you for that. And now Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Baker's beat me to it, because that is precisely the line that I would have taken, not wanting to hold this up unduly, but quite frankly, after all the consultation and all the time spent on it, what we've got in front of us is a complete and utter mess. The crime and disorder issues, I think it's been spoken and spoken and spoken about. Everybody understands that. There's no way on earth that we can approve this in its current form. The disabled parking issue, again, everybody's talked about it and talked about it. As far as I'm concerned, there might as well be no dedicated disabled parking at this location, because it's too far away from where people will want to go. I would rather see the Castlegate displaced disabled parking actually facilitated in town, or even, more controversially, 25 spaces left on Castlegate car park, and the development of that area fitting around providing disabled parking. But the biggest concern I've got, and I voiced it early on, was that I think we've been had for fools tonight. We should have had the conservation architect here. We should have been able to question him on the harmful impacts of this building, and most especially putting a solar panel array in the centre of the city like this. This local authority had the perfect opportunity to promote solar panels on the community stadium. Out of the way, no impact. We learn here that Historic England are objecting, maintaining an objection, and our own conservation architect is objecting strongly to the inclusion of solar panels on top of this, adding to the high mass and potential sunlight deflection issues. There is no way that I want to put my name to this, but I think if it was deferred, we would see these issues resolved, because the council want to push ahead and move this linked scheme together. I think that's the most sensible thing that we could do as a committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kilbane.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I'm going to vote against this, and I'm looking at the screen doing the numbers, and I'm thinking that there's probably a majority in favour of voting for it. So obviously I've got to come up with some arguments to persuade those who are in favour of it to change their minds, which is quite an unusual thing in these meetings. I think my first argument's probably got its best sway with you, which is echoing what Councillor Waters and Councillor Lomas has said. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues about this proposal is the harm that it does to the heritage assets, and we haven't talked about that tonight. We didn't ask many questions about it because there's nobody from conservation here to ask those questions of, and I really need some answers as to why they think that the heritage assessment that was done was inadequate and that they can't base a judgment on it, etc. And I think, you know, if what we're resorting to is hiding the buildings that we're building to protect the conservation assets, then we shouldn't be approving buildings that that we need to hide. So I think just in terms of the harms to the heritage assets, I think there is grounds for refusing this application. And I think most of the faces I'm looking at would find that a persuasive argument. I think maybe less of you will find persuasive the argument that we shouldn't now be approving anything that's to do with highways that doesn't at least reference an LTN 120, because that is the new standard guidance for cycling and walking infrastructure. It should at least be referenced, and you know, to just say, oh, there isn't room for it, it's not really good enough. There needs to be a proper assessment of that in the application. So, and not least because the government's saying that they're not going to fund projects unless they comply with the LTN 120. So I think we've probably got a responsibility to reject on those grounds. I think maybe one or two people might be persuaded by that argument. I guess this is the point where I lose you though, and you'll start to think I'm a bit of a loony. So I don't expect to persuade many of you with this argument. However, the idea that we should be building car parks in the city centre in 2020 is faintly ludicrous, really. I agree with the public speakers from earlier on. It is a very 1970s suggestion. You know, it's a little bit like trying to invest in Betamax when VHS is just coming out, or mini discs when CD-ROMs are on the horizon. We are a matter of years away from automated vehicles that you'll be calling up on an app on your phone that will pick you up wherever you are and take you wherever you're going. The idea of personal ownership of cars is on its way out. I think most cities can see that. Most urban planners can see that. You don't really need to be a visionary to see that that's the direction of travel. So I think if we approve this tonight, we will be approving, in Councillor Pavlovic's words, a huge white elephant, and one that we've discovered can't actually even be converted into useful dwellings. So for all those reasons, pick whichever one you find most persuasive. I will be voting against this application tonight.
Councillor Doughty.
Thank you, Chair. I have a lot of mixed emotions with this one. I have to say, we definitely need to replace Castle Car Park, and for the reasons not least that Councillor Widdowson spoke of earlier about the site being susceptible, or the St George's Field being susceptible to flooding, and the not being able to use it for alternative purposes, shall we say, other than something like this. It does seem to me to be the ideal location to have a good number of car parking spaces to free up Castle Car Park in particular. But I am concerned about the security aspects of it. And, you know, if we're going to approve this, I do think we need some condition around that aspect. I'm content if Councillor Pavlovich, as Vice Chair, reaches an agreement with the Chair on what that might be, bearing in mind Councillor Pavlovich has serious concerns about the security aspects. I'd be more confident in giving my support. So I'll continue to listen to the rest of the debate, but I think that aspect really does need to be dealt with. Thank you.
Councillor Widdowson. Then Councillor Fisher.
Apologies for that. I managed to stop the video at the same time. I think there is a significant amount to discuss this evening. One of the things I would like to highlight, though, is I'm surprised that everybody's focusing on how dangerous York city centre is. My understanding is we're one of the lowest authorities across the country. We're in the bottom 10, so we're extraordinarily safe. We can make it safer, but we are a very, very safe city. Going on to some of the other points, car parking, you're dead right, Rosie, car parking across the city has to be assessed. The council are doing that. They have a rolling programme of assessing the car parking right the way across the city so we can get the right spaces in the right place for the right timing. And going on to Blue Badge, we commissioned a report about 7 weeks ago, which has been in the exec papers, saying that we are looking at Blue Badge, meeting Blue Badge requirements, again, right the way across the city, not with car parking spaces in one particular place, not with just shop mobility, not with anything else. What is actually the solution for what the Blue Badge holders require? Because as Councillor Fitzpatrick has rightly said, they have a numerous and varied requirements. So that is also in train. Now, some of the Blue Badge spaces may be in this car park, some of them may be in the public realm that we're talking about creating, some of them may be elsewhere. That is for the council officers to go away with, do the work and then report back on.
Thank you. I'm sure that we're not going to be solving all the parking issues and particularly Blue Badge issues this evening. Councillor Fisher and then Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Chair. I came to York in 1978, and one of the things that amazed me at the time is how a car park had been built at the bottom of Clifford's Tower, because I've always thought that is an appalling eyesore, a terrible place to put a car park. It detracts monumentally from the aspect of Clifford's Tower. And apart from that, it's been there a long time, because if you actually go there, the car parking bays are incredibly narrow. I've only parked in there once in my life, or tried to, and I was in a two-seater sports car and I couldn't open the car doors to get out the car, so I had to go elsewhere. It's an appalling place and we need to get rid of it as a matter of urgency. But there then comes the problem of, do we replace the car parking on that car park? Now, there's the anti-car lobby would say, no, let's go for sustainable transport, cycling, walking. But unfortunately, for some people, that is not possible. There are people who need to go in there and take heavy loads out. They need somewhere to park. And obviously, St George's Field is one of the nearest car parks. Now, I take Councillor Lomas's point about reduction in the number of disabled car parking places, but there are two things about that. The overall number of car parking places is going down from 505 to 372. So we're retaining 73% of our car parking, which is a reduction of 27%. The number of disabled places on the Castlegate car park and the St George's Field one is going from 36 to 26, which is 72%. So it's more or less in line. And I would also argue that actually St George's Field car park is not a great place for disabled parking. It's not close to the city centre. And I strongly recommend that we look at trying to compensate those disabled car parks on other car parks more closely related to the city centre. How do I feel about this scheme in all? I think there are some issues that need to be addressed, such as the security, but I think that condition will do it. Do I feel that it's right to replace car parking? Yes, I do, because the city centre economy is under strain. We've seen today 2 more shops have closed down. Nothing to do with car parking. It's a national chain going bust. But retailers in the city centre are under pressure, and we have an obligation to ensure that whilst we respect the views of the motion in December 2019 to reduce unnecessary car journeys within the city centre, we don't kill retail by completely eliminating car parking in the area just outside the city centre. And I regard this as just been outside the city centre. It's outside the inner ring road. So I think it's an appropriate place to put that car parking. On balance, I shall support this application.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all the submissions. And as normal, Councillor Lomas always says it's just slightly better than I do. It's because she was a better probation officer than me as well. But I've, as Vice Chair, I have heard everything that's been said. I still have some significant concerns in respect to the scrutiny, but equally, having also heard and in mind of the next application that we've got, I am very concerned that given the issues relating to heritage matters, that to not have the conservation architect here strikes me as being insufficient for us to therefore make a concrete decision. And I say that because reputation and transparency is all when we are a planning committee, and when the applicant is also the city council, it is all the more important that all the concerns and objections are heard and considered. And we've had the conservation architect at every virtual planning that I can remember, and the ones where he's objecting or strongly objecting, he's not asked to attend to elaborate on the views that he's raised. And so for those reasons, I would prefer that we deferred this matter. That would be my view. Given that the application is for a vote for approval, I'm afraid I'm going to have to vote against that.
Okay, well, I think we've come to the point where we do put this to the vote. It was proposed and seconded quite some time ago, and since then we've heard a variety of responses, and people have made their positions clear for a variety of different reasons. Personally, I did find myself very much in agreement with the points that Councillor Fisher was making, and having lived in the city for many years, I likewise find the current arrangement just absolutely appalling and unbelievable. And I'm sure that if this committee was presented with an application to put a large car park around Clifford's Tower, I know exactly where we'd all be standing. But the application we have before us is the one that we have before us, and we have to look at it in its present form and on its own merits. And I think that on balance, that's clear. Becky, we need to put this to the vote. I think there have been one or two points where you've wanted to come in, and I haven't given you the opportunity of doing that. So if there's anything you want to say prior to summing up the proposal as we would now be voting on it, please do.
Yeah, no problem. In terms of the conservation architect, I get the point that Councillor Pavlovic has said, but as I've previously advised, their comments are available. All their advice is out there, it's available, it's very clear that they don't support the scheme. So I don't see what else having them here would have said. They would have reiterated that they don't support the scheme, and I would have reiterated that it's a planning balance, and that's the judgment that we've made. So that's the reason why. In terms of just in the background, I've been looking at the conditions along with Heidi in terms of security. We've actually suggesting splitting it up into two, so that it would say before the development is brought into use, a scheme for security measures shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The details should be agreed in consultation with North Yorkshire Police and brought into use before the scheme is brought into use. And then second to that, within 6 months of opening, a review of the security arrangements at the site shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and any recommended changes shall be implemented within 3 months of that, once we've given the approval of the changes. So that's it, and the conditions that are in the additional information as well, because there was some additional drainage conditions in the additional information that also need to be included.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does. Councillor Baker, is there something that you're needing clarity on?
Sorry, no, just before we go to a vote on approving or not, I just wanted to amend another condition. Have I got time to do that? It's quite simple.
Well, try.
It's number 22 about the hours of operation of the construction. I really don't think it needs to say except in case of emergency, because if there was an actual emergency going on in the vicinity, you know, that would be fine. We'd accept that. But in terms of the hours of operation of what the construction teams are doing, there shouldn't be anything that actually is an emergency, and therefore they should stick to the conditions of operation based on their own management and delivery of their work.
That's the standard condition that says unless an emergency, because it's not reasonable, because there is a very occasional emergency where they would need to do something. That's just our advice.
It's a standard condition.
It's a standard.
Can I just indicate by a show of hands whether there are other members who are feeling strongly enough about this that we? No, I don't see that. Okay, but thanks for the question. Thank you. Please continue, if you would, Becky.
I think that was it from me in terms of the summing up. It's just that I've split the security into two questions, and two conditions, and the one in the additional ones in the additional information. Okay.
So
thank you.
Are members clear as to what it is we would be voting on as we put this to the vote? I see nods. Okay, that's fine. And can I also see by a show of hands that all members have been able to listen to and participate fully in the debate through? Again, I see all hands. Thank you very much. In that case, I think we're ready to put this to the vote. And if I could ask the democracy officer to do that, please.
Thanks, Chair. Members, so a motion to approve, proposed by Councillor Hollier and seconded by Councillor Daubeny. Please state if you're for, against, or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Baker.
Against.
Councillor Barker.
Against.
Councillor Daubeny.
For.
Councillor Doughty.
For.
Councillor Douglas.
Against.
Councillor Fenton.
For.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Hollier.
For.
Councillor Kilbane.
Against.
Councillor Lomas.
Against.
Councillor Pavlovich.
You almost got me, Becky, but against.
Councillor Waters.
Against.
Councillor Widdowson.
For.
And the Chair.
For.
It's 8 against and 7 for, Chair.
Thank
the
you.
motion
So
falls.
That motion has fallen. So as we move on, I look to Councillor Pavlovic initially.
Can I propose, therefore, that we defer for to take Councillor Baker's. No, I'll let Councillor Baker do it because she actually raised the points. But yes, I would second anything.
Okay. Are you happy to reiterate what you began to propose earlier, Councillor Baker, in terms of a deferral?
Yes, thank you. I do think that given the opportunities here for a better design based on, as I take Councillor Widdowson's point about the fact that we're continually assessing car parking in the city, but we have time now over the next 6 months to do a full car parking capacity review to take into account many of the changes post-COVID as well, and people's transport preferences and changes, to then get that done, get the results of that fed back in. And, you know, if the applicant wants to bring back a different design, taking into account those results, taking into account points about safety and security, and also to refine the traffic impacts at various points around the site, we've got time to do that. So I would recommend deferral.
Do I have a seconder for that? I saw Councillor Pavlovic's hand immediately, and also I noted that Councillor Waters. So that has been proposed and seconded. Again, we would need to be clear what it is that we're voting on. So I don't know if you've been able to pick up all of those points, Becky, but if we're to vote on a deferral, on what grounds?
Thank you, Chair. From the grounds that I've just got, it was for car parking, a full car parking review to take place in terms of the city centre as a whole, and for the traffic implications of the site to be re-looked at in terms of, I didn't actually get anything more than that. It was just the traffic implications.
Yeah, I can see your hand, Councillor Pavlovic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Waters too.
Can we also incorporate the disability assessment, the appropriate disability assessment of the site, and also the attendance of the heritage, the conservation architect, because I do feel that the heritage elements are a very valid reason for a further deferral.
Okay, and Councillor Waters, did you have a further point?
Yeah, just picking up similar points. I think we should be mentioning to address the concerns of the conservation architect. And I also think we ought to have a more detailed landscaping plan that actually shows what is proposed to be planted at a screening. As I've said, something like evergreen oaks that would actually grow to a decent size and maintain cover during winter.
Can I come in here?
Yes, please do, Becky.
We've got that information in terms of the trees, what's going to be lost and what's proposed. It's not reasonable to ask for anything more. I mean, we can say that, but and in terms of overcoming the conservation architect's concerns, I think that would be a significant redraw, and it would take away the solar panels. So is that something that members want to see? Do members want to see the removal of the solar panels from this scheme? Because that's his principal area of concern, is the solar races. So it then becomes a much bigger deferral reason that you need to be clear about whether or not that's something that you want to see.
I'm pretty confident that if this scheme hadn't been put forward to include the PV panels, we'd all be asking the question, why on earth are we not putting PV panels on this? Councillor Baker. Councillor Baker, please. Councillor Baker.
Thanks. I think it's part of the implications of what the city centre car parking capacity study could lead to, is that some of the major concerns of the conservation architect around mitigating the size of this very large building could potentially change, and that would be significant if it were to be found that a reduction in the levels and the numbers of car parking was actually more appropriate.
Okay. Becky, is there some way that we can word this that isn't going to tie us in unnecessary and rather
Yeah, I think what
difficult
what we
territory.
can do is we'll look at a review of the car parking needs within the city centre and how that will reflect on the need for the car parking spaces as part of this development. And then if it does involve a significant change, that may result in a complete change to of the design of the proposal. So yeah, I think we can incorporate that within the looking at the car parking needs and if there's any changes going forward. The only thing I would say in terms of, I wouldn't necessarily say we can say we've got to wait 6 months, because again, I'm going to go back to reasonable terms in terms of planning, because from our point of view as planning officers, we've said that there's enough information to determine it now. If this was not necessarily a council scheme, they could absolutely appeal non-determination at this point, and I would be saying to you, I can't see how we'd win an appeal. You're potentially putting us at risk at costs. So that's the advice that I would be giving to you if it wasn't the council at this point in time. So it'd be remiss of me not to remind you of that at this point in time.
Councillor Lomas, please be brief.
I absolutely will be. I think it's absolutely crucial that we include a requirement that the conservation architect is present at our next consideration of this application in future. Regardless of anything else that anyone else has said, that has to happen in order for us to properly consider this. We have to be able to take advice from relevant officers.
I think that's been heard. I'm not sure it can be a condition as such. Councillor Fenton.
Sorry, I've put my hand down, Chair. The point
it had popped up and popped down, and okay. And Councillor Waters, is there something urgent that you need to add?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I'm not having that from the planning officer mooting an appeal and costs and such, like if it had been a private developer. For the simple reason there is a strong objection from the council's own conservation architect, and there's a strong objection from Historic England as well.
Councillor Waters, it's my job to give you advice, and I have to be consistent in my advice, and that's what I'm doing.
That's fully understood. Okay, I think we're now at a point where we can put this to the vote. Before I do that, just once again, Becky, if you would just clarify the wording of this deferral.
Okay, so it's to undertake a full review of the car parking need within the city centre and how that will potentially impact the need for the car parking spaces and any potential future impacts on the design of the proposals. As an aside, you also want attendance by the conservation officer, architect, relevant officer at the next committee, and about traffic, looking at potential traffic impacts in terms of pedestrian and cycleways.
And the disabled assessment, disability assessment.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So again, can I just check that all members have been able to participate fully and have heard everything that's been said? Just a show of hands. Thank you. I've seen everybody. And I invite the democracy officer to conduct the vote, please.
Thanks, Chair. So there's a motion to defer proposed by Councillor Baker and seconded by Councillor Pavlovich. Please state if you're for, against or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Barker.
Abstain.
Councillor Daubeny.
Abstain.
Councillor Doughty.
Abstain.
Councillor Douglas.
For.
Councillor Fenton.
Against.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Hollier.
Against.
Councillor Kilbane.
For.
Councillor Lomas.
For.
Councillor Pavlovic.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Widowson.
Against.
Councillor Cullick.
Against.
Chair, you got 7 for, 5 against, with 3 abstentions.
So the deferral is carried and we've come to a conclusion. Thank you very much for your participation in that. And we're going to take a break. It is almost 8:15.
Can I raise a point of order, please, Chair?
You can.
Can I propose that we postpone the next item until the conservation architect is available? I've got questions that I need to ask concerning their advice. I can only really ask them in person, and I don't feel as they'll be properly informed enough to make a decision without being able to have that conversation.
Councillor Waters, were you about to second that?
Yes, I'm more than happy to second that, especially when you take into account what is written on page 142 by the conservation architect.
Okay. Then I think before we take a break, it would be helpful to resolve this. And I guess it doesn't need much of a summary, but it has been proposed and seconded that the third item on our agenda is deferred. Becky, do you need to say anything just to clarify the grounds for that as we put that to the test?
The attendance of the conservation architect to answer questions.
Thank you. I take it for granted that everybody has been present as we discussed that briefly. Would you like to put that to the vote, please?
Chair, Councillor Waters was waving at you just then. I don't know if you saw.
No,
yeah, one of the main reasons for any deferral of this is in paragraph 3.1, where the conservation architect quite clearly says that the setting of the heritage assets has not been fully understood. It's not been properly assessed, according to that officer. So how on earth could a recommendation for approval or refusal have been made by the officers?
Okay, can you please conduct a name vote on that?
Thanks, Chair. So it's been proposed that the third item is deferred by Councillor Kilbane, seconded by Councillor Waters. So please state if you are for, against or abstaining. Councillor Baker.
Against.
Councillor Barker.
For.
Councillor Daubeny.
Against.
Councillor Doughty.
For.
Councillor Douglas.
For.
Councillor Fenton.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
For.
Councillor Hollier.
Against.
Councillor Kilbane.
For.
Councillor Lomas.
For.
Councillor Pavlovic.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Widdowson.
Against.
And the Chair.
Against.
It's 8 for and 7 against, Chair. That carries.
So that item on our agenda is deferred. There are no urgent items of business. Therefore, I thank members for their participation this evening. It's been very constructive and has finished just a little sooner than I thought it might have done. But thank you and good night. God bless.
Good night. Thanks.